Boo. Hey guys, my name is Fahim. I am an epidemiologist by day, and I am a gamer by night. I love playing video games, Warcraft, any type of sports games. That's kind of my thing. Um, but I also have an interest in history and also watching sports. And when I was on YouTube, I actually stumbled across this guy's video, vlogging. This guy, his channel's named Vlogging Through History. Really good content. I do highly recommend watching his stuff. There are a few videos like about Germany and whether they could have won World War II. So I did like his take on that video. So I highly recommend watching this guy. I believe his name is hold on, let me go through. Yes, his name is Chris. So I highly recommend
Big time
watching this video
CEOs
first.
like to say
Give me one
things like,
second.
big ideas can come from any.
Whoops, sorry, give me a sec. But yeah, so basically when I was watching this video, there were a few things that I saw that I'm like, yeah, I really want to put my 2 cents into this. And, it's not because of his political affiliation, which, he'll go into later in the video. It's it's mainly when I was watching this video, there were some things with some presidents that he would just basically gloss over. Uh, some of the achievements or some of the things that some of the presidents did. Where I'm like, no, we got to talk about this a little bit more. He's got to give a little bit um more credence to what they were doing. Now, granted, I'm guessing he was trying to make this video a little bit more fun, a little bit more lighthearted, and not to offend anyone. But the problem is, it's like you can't just like you'll see for some of them, you can't just gloss over their legacies or any of the bad stuff that they did and act like it never existed just to move on and appease your appease your subscribers. Like, you do have to talk about it. And so for me, I felt like it'd be a good idea to at least kind of expound on some of the presidents, some of the ones that he kind of glossed over. So basically, how I'm gonna do this video is I'm gonna play his video, and he's gonna go over how he's gonna rank them, which and I'll stop a little bit into the video to explain how my own ranking of the presidents is gonna differ. But basically, I'm gonna let him talk. I'm gonna I shouldn't say let him talk. I'm gonna hear his rankings for each president, and then after he ranks that particular president, I'm gonna stop the video. I'm gonna put my 2 cents in, whether I agree with him, whether I don't. Um, and expound a little bit on the differences in the rankings that we may have, or if they're the same, why they're the same. Like, if I agree with what he has to say. So basically, that's pretty much how it's gonna play out. And Yeah, so let's go ahead and get this started. And I'll try not to pause too much beyond what is needed for this video, but I'll definitely try to add my 2 cents in, and yeah, let's go from there. So here we go.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and go live, but we're going to wait about 2 more minutes before I actually get started with the rankings. I want to get going here in just a minute. Wasn't expecting to do a stream today, and I was actually expecting to do a reaction video, but my uncle's been here pressure washing our deck all day, and it's been crazy loud, and so I haven't been able to record. And I didn't know that was happening. My mother-in-law called him, I guess, and had him come over. And so I haven't been able to record. I was able to record quick this morning a video for my other channel, but I haven't been able to do anything else. So I thought I would just go ahead and do a live stream. And this is something I've been wanting to do for a while anyway. So yeah, just a couple of reminders, and I'll probably pin a comment about this. I will not be ranking. I have a personal rule, and I use this rule on Discord, and I use it on my channel as well, is that I don't deal with stuff from post-1992. I think it's too close to modern times, and people get really heated and angry and make things personal when you start dealing with more modern stuff. So I will not be ranking Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Donald Trump, Barack Obama, or Joe Biden in this. I will not be doing any of those. But I certainly welcome you to express your opinions as we go through this. That's kind of the point. Makes for a great discussion.
Just to point this out, I will be following his format. I won't be going beyond beyond the first Bush, which was George W. right, or J, whatever. I won't be going beyond the first Bush. After his term, I'm not going to be talking about Bill Clinton. Not going to be talking about George H.W. Bush. Not going to be talking about Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. Won't be talking about any of them. So I will follow his format, in my own rankings. So, and I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning. So as I listen to his video and his rankings, I'll be, switching to my own and, giving my own rankings and giving my own rationale as to why I put these presidents where I put them. But yeah.
And as Insane said, he's one of our moderators. It is a rule that we have for the channel that we don't get into political debates about modern politics. So please save your opinions on Donald Trump or Barack Obama and all that kind of stuff like that. You'll probably just get muted if you do it.
Yeah, they are very, very divisive for different reasons, and
we're not here to argue about that stuff. We're here to talk about history. And so I do have slow chat on just to prevent anybody from spamming. You can type a message every 20 seconds. With almost 200 people in here before we even get started, I think that's pretty fair to do that. It allows me to kind of still be able to keep up mostly on what's happening. So we're gonna go ahead and start. Admin, don't demote me, please. Insane is the admin, so you can't really do that. So we're gonna start from the beginning, and I don't know why some of them are showing up on here twice.
Yeah, that was pretty funny when I saw it. I'm like, I was watching this with my roommate, and I'm like, is it just me or the presidents are coming up a couple times? But yeah, I think because the site he uses is Tier Maker, which, again, if you want to rank things pretty quickly, is a really good site to use. So I do recommend Tier Maker as well if you're ever in the mood to rank anything. But yeah, I think the one that he used just had them, a couple times. So. And also, my format, the way that I have it, SABCD, is a little different from how he has his. I don't know if you can barely see it, but he will be adding his own grades to it, which pretty much look the same as this. So, which is why I'm just have it like this in the first place. So I don't have to, you guys don't have to watch me adjust it in real time. I already have it set up. But yeah, let's go ahead and hear what he has to say.
But I think I know all the presidents well enough to recognize them by sight since you don't see their names on here. We're going to start from the very beginning and work our way up. We do have S, A, B, C, and D. I think we should probably add an F tier, don't you?
What I tell you?
Can we add an F? Yeah, let's add. We need to add F. There needs to be an F. I will use that sparingly. S and F, as far as I'm concerned, should be used sparingly and not very often. Woodrow Wilson deserves his own tier. We'll get to that. And I will love to hear your opinions on each one of these as we get to each one. Flo.
Don't worry, man. You will be hearing my opinion. I promise you that. With some of them, it's just, yeah.
Okay, awesome. I was just there a couple weeks ago in Yorktown. I've still got to get my video edited from the Yorktown battlefield. So we're going to start with George Washington. And I think George Washington, where is he? There he is right there. I think George Washington is definitely going to be one of the very few that I put in the S tier. And I would love to hear your opinions as far as where you think he should be and why. You got to remember, when George Washington takes office, there has never been a president. And the Constitution is not incredibly specific about what the role of president looks like. So a lot of what we have to this day about how the presidency looks, how it operates, what the president's role is is largely thanks to George Washington. He set the standard. So I have to put him in as an S. I don't think George Washington was a great general, but we're ranking him on presidency. He was very good at staying above the political fray. He had his two primary members of his cabinet, his cabinet, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, could not stand each other, and they basically become the father of the two political parties, the political party system that we have in the United States. And he kind of stayed above that fray and kept them together. And yeah, Sam's absolutely right. He could have been a king. If he'd have given even the slightest hint that he was willing to do it, they would have made him a king. Or at the very least, he would have been president for life. He's the one that willingly chose to step down. And I love how the musical Hamilton puts it in his in the part where they're talking about his farewell address. He says, the nation needs to learn to move on from me. They had relied on him to put the Constitution together. They had relied on him to lead them in the War for Independence. They relied on him to be the first president. And what he was saying is, it's time. The nation needs to learn that I am not always going to be here, and they need to be able to pass it on. Yeah, Nathan, you make a good point with some of these guys that it's really difficult to judge fairly. Now, Zachary Taylor was in office for a little while. But yeah, Garfield, William Henry Harrison did not have that long, and we'll address that when we get to those ones. But yeah, I give Washington a ton of, yeah, somebody makes a good point, Charles, about restraint, ruling from restraint. Fraser, Washington.
So yeah, so basically, to expound on what he's saying, essentially Washington, yeah, is also S tier for me. There is no question about his legacy. All right, computer, there you go. Yeah, his legacy. All right. There we go. Not there. There we go. Yeah, his legacy will not be matched except for one other president that, well, you guys probably obviously know which one that president is. You know, War of Independence, leading us through that, helping to create the Constitution. But I think what he mentions was Washington's most important role was setting the precedent for the president. Basically, essentially just ensuring that, like, or basically just leaving office after 8 years when he could have made the office literally anything that he wanted to. He could have made it a monarchy. He could have made it a dictatorship. They were willing to do anything for Washington. Essentially, the election pretty much when they were trying to get the first president, or when they were trying when the government was trying to elect the first president, was basically a grassroots campaign to ensure that Washington was the man for the job. There was no other candidate. That's literally never happened before. I mean, yes, there have been some elections where it was landslides where everyone knew who the president was going to be, but you still had competition, even if the competition was weak. But in this case, zero competition to have Washington to have anyone else other than Washington. And again, unmatched legacy in terms of, you know, as a founding father, just being in the fray. And as a general, yeah, he did struggle in a few battles here and there, but ultimately at the end of the day, what matters is if you won or lost. We won, therefore I'm not gonna grill him too much on, you know, his military exploits. But I will say, because he helped to, you know, help us get our independence, he helped to create the Constitution, he established a cabinet, which, you know, of course, you know, setting a precedent, leaving office after 8 years, which was probably the most important thing that he could do, ensuring that, you know, presidents didn't get any ideas to, oh, let me stay in office for 3 terms, 4 terms, you know, let me just stay in for life. So, you know, that particular precedent is, you know, unmatched. And of course, putting down a Whiskey Rebellion, you know, showing that the government had enough power, the central government at least had enough power to enforce its own laws. And of course, you know, ensuring that he had the best people in his cabinet to, you know, make the nation go. Having someone like Alexander Hamilton, who pretty much helped to, you know, essentially create the U.S. economy from literally scratch, because the states had a crap ton of debts that they had to pay, and the federal government assumed those debts. And then, of course, Jefferson being Secretary of State, and his foreign diplomacy there. So John Adams is vice president. I forget. Knox as Secretary of War. Like his first cabinet's pretty much unmatched. Like there'll probably never be a better cabinet. So yeah, easy A. no arguments there. Yeah, that is, and there were quite a few that me and him agreed on, but that one in particular, there's not much to expound on, even though I spent like a good 5 minutes talking about him. But yeah, he's definitely yes tier, no questions.
Washington or Watson, what part of Scotland are you in? That's very cool. This is gonna take all day if I talk this long about each one, and I won't because there's.
Oh, and also because I am reacting to his video, and I'm gonna expound a little bit longer. My video is probably gonna be longer than an hour, so those of you who are watching live stream, I apologize. This will be a pretty long video. It wouldn't surprise me if it was like 2 hours or something. So I do apologize beforehand, but I did feel it was necessary to kind of expound on a lot of the presidents that he may have just glossed over and just like, yeah, they were whatever. You can't do that. So yeah,
there's not much to say about some of them. Let's move on to John Adams. There he is right here. Moto Zealot, thank you so much. Woodrow Wilson, F tier. Well, don't worry, I am not a fan of Woodrow Wilson. We will get to that.
Yeah, Woodrow. That is I'll get to him, like he will get to him, but yeah, that's also another one where you'll see
that one. Hello from Ann Arbor, Michigan. That is a very ugly sweatshirt that I have on. Thank you. I'm glad you approve. All right, John Adams. Gonna give him a D, mostly because of the Alien and Sedition Acts. Man, for a guy who was so prominent, and listen, John Adams is really underrated as a founding father. He did so much for this country, and I don't think he gets nearly enough credit for everything he did for this country. That said, oh, you're in Edinburgh? Very cool, Fraser. Hopefully I'll be there in a couple of months. Yeah, I could have put him C, Padme. That's fair. So if I was judging John Adams on his whole career, he'd be much higher. But simply on his presidency, just because the Alien and Sedition Acts, just for me, for somebody who's a founding father, who fought for the things that this country was fighting for, to turn around and sign that act, that just drops him to a D at best for me. Hey, Samuel, you'll be happy to know that I am a UK basketball fan, and in my closet, which is only about 15 feet away, there is a UK long-sleeve t-shirt hanging up. So what am I basing these ranks on? My own opinion. My own opinion from history, how I think they performed as president. Did they have a positive or a negative impact on the country? Did the things that they do, that they did, not necessarily on whether I agreed with them, because there's going to be some presidents that I don't agree with politically, but that I still think did a really good job, and we're actually going to get to one of those in just a minute.
So on that note, of course, this is an opinion. This is a ranking. So obviously it's going to be his own opinion. But there are quite a few presidents that he talks about in the video where he does not do that. He basically just like one of them in particular, like he'll talk about a personal story about, how this president, made him feel. And that's pretty much the only rationale that he gives as to why he gave this president like a high ranking. And you'll see which president he's talking about, but there's a lot of presidents where he just doesn't even talk about the good and the bad. He just he'll just say they're weak or they're pretty good and not really expound on why, or he won't give the complete picture. That is the one thing I did have a problem with in this video, where I'm like, no, I have to elaborate. For those who do get a chance to watch this video, there has to be, they have to get the full picture for all of these presidents. It can't just be, oh yeah, he's weak and he did, he's weak because he did this one thing. It's like, okay, but there's also a few other things that he did as well that were very good. John Adams in particular, So me personally, I would rank him. Where is John Adams? I would rank him a C, and I'll tell you why. Because yes, the Alien and Sedition Acts, they were very bad. This, preventing immigrants from coming through, and also not allowing people to criticize the government. It's, that's tough. That's tough because part of what makes us all American is our ability to criticize the government without any compunction. We can say what we want about the government and not be arrested for it. That is the beauty of being an American. You can say what you want. However, that particular act, if it wasn't for that, I would actually put John Adams at a B. And I'll tell you why. The reason for that is, number one, he was an excellent diplomat. He did not allow us to go to war with Britain and France when we were in no position to fight either Napoleon or, Great Britain. Because if we got into a fight with the French, Napoleon would have beat the brakes off of us once he landed. And we had no navy to, prevent him from coming to America, which is the next point that I'm about to make with John Adams, is that he actually is the father of the American Navy, because he's the first one to realize, hey, we kind of need a navy to protect our borders. We can't just allow any country to just waltz in here and just do whatever they want. So he actually got that ball rolling in building up our navy. So that's another thing that John Adams did. So his diplomacy, especially in the XYZ affair, actually, I think, I'm trying to remember, yeah, with the XYZ affair, where pretty much France was trying to pretty much trying to extort us in order for us to get to talk to the French Prime Minister or whatever the case was. It's like, no, like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to pay you, for one. And then for another, it's like, yeah, no, that was just straight extortion. And Adams played a key role in basically mediating, between, he pretty much prevented Congress. What's the word I'm looking for? He pretty much prevented us from going to war against either one of those two nations at a time where we flat out could not afford to go to war against either one of them. We eventually did go to war with one of them, and it didn't work out so well. But he definitely helped to, he was excellent diplomatically, and he helped to build our navy. And of course, like the gentleman said in the video, his contributions as a founding father cannot be overstated enough. He was almost as key as Washington in terms of getting our nation started. So I do think people give Adams a lot of crap for the Alien and Sedition Acts, and rightfully so, because you can't stop people from saying what they want to say about the government, because that is what we fought for, the ability to have our own voice, to have our independence, our own voice, to say that, hey, we're a nation founded on democracy, that we can elect our own officials, and we can say whatever we want about them. We can transition from one party to another. We can have a peaceful transition of power and not have it be contentious. And also I apologize if I keep looking to the right. I have a little bit of cheat sheet to help me get my points together, because there are some presidents where I don't have that much knowledge of, and I did have to do a bit of research to to see the good and the bad, to see what their legacy truly was, instead of just, yeah, he was weak, yeah, he was strong, and not say anything about it. I want the complete story. So, but I do think with Adams, I would give him a C. I'm a little bit more lenient, because I understand his personality was, he was a very insecure man, and very stubborn, which is why, he passed something like that. He allowed something like this to be passed. And there is another thing that that this man does talk about, how he's not gonna have a president's personality influence their ranking. But the problem is, someone's personality, or a president, every one of these presidents have their own personalities, and it does indicate how they're gonna run the country during that particular time. You can't separate a person's personality from how they run their office. It's like an analogy is like, okay, LeBron James would be great, or LeBron James wouldn't be any good if he didn't have his athleticism. Like, a basketball player's athleticism is every part of their, how good or bad they are. Like, it's an inherent part. You can't just say, yeah, he's good or bad despite his athleticism. Like, you can't. I don't know if I'm getting through with this particular point, but like, just like a basketball player relies on his or her athleticism to do good or bad in the league, a president relies on his or her, eventually, hopefully, it relies on their personality to run their office, to run the executive branch. So you can't discount that. Like, a president like Andrew Jackson, who's pretty much known for his personality, he ran how he thought. He ran according to his personality. He ran his administration according to his personality. Like, you can't separate the two. It's one and the same. It's intrinsic. So I will use their personality, but not to the extent, not to like a major extent, but it does help to tell the story of each individual president. So that's something I just wanted to say before, I continue playing this video. But yeah.
Would it be sensible to fill out the worst presidents first and go to the more challenging tiers above? Maybe. I just kind of like doing it this way in order of history. So let's.
Same. I think it makes more sense to just do it chronologically, instead of just, yeah, S tiers, bam, 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 A tiers, bam, bam, bam. I don't know. It just makes more. Excuse me. It just makes more sense doing it chronologically.
Let's move on to Thomas Jefferson. And Jefferson's one of the first real challenges for me because I don't like Jefferson personally. I think he was kind of a lousy human being, and I don't just mean that because of the slavery stuff, because Washington owned slaves, and a lot of these other presidents owned slaves. It's really more of a personal opinion based on how he treated his political opponents, which I know was pretty common for that day. Can I change the color of F to not yellow? Is there a way to do that? Yeah, let's take a... Oh, yeah, we could do that. I don't know. Let's make it blue. There we go. We'll make it blue. How's that? Cleveland should be voted on 2 times. A bunch of them are on here twice. I don't know how that happened with the pictures. Brandon, we're going to get to Grant when we get that far. Jackson, I almost did a tier list on the Monarchs of England today. That was almost what I chose to go with. And holy cow, we have over 500 people in there. That's awesome. So please subscribe if you're new to the channel. All right, Thomas Jefferson. Based solely on his performance as President of the United States, I'm going to put him at an A. Like I said, I'm going to use F and S pretty sparingly. But very cool, Abraham. My mother lives in Tucson. She actually lives a couple blocks away from where Congresswoman Giffords was shot. Why no E? Because A, B, C, D, and F are the grades that are used in classes here and stuff like that. Charlie, I agree. This community is fantastic, and that's one of my favorite things about having a YouTube channel. It's not that I get a bunch of people to view my videos. It's that we've created this incredible community, and I get to connect with all these people who are as crazy about history as I am. So Thomas Jefferson, he doubles the size of the country with the Louisiana Purchase, which is a huge deal. He starts the military academy at West Point, which was a big deal for our country starting out. So he did some really good things, I think. He rolls back some of the Federalist policies that happened under Washington.
New Ocean Spray Fruit Medley. Boom.
Let's talk Cash App. Want to explore a new way to bank? Like invest.
And Adams. So this is kind of the first time that you have a change in political party, even though technically there weren't really well-defined parties yet. What is fantastic, Insane? Let me know. We're up to 574. This is awesome. This is the most people I've ever had on a stream. I love it. Please hit like if you haven't already. Ben, I want to go to the Balls Bluff battlefield. That's on my list up there in northeastern Virginia. AMG, yeah, more on achievement and legacy rather than character, because if you judge on character, it gets really dicey. Appreciate that, great Jimmy. Thank you, Emil. I appreciate that. Oh, TR, he's coming. So, yeah, Jefferson, I think, did a lot of really great things for the country. So, we're on now to Jane.
Okay, so Thomas Jefferson, about him. And yes, there are quite a few good points that he did make. But this is what I was talking about earlier, about how he just glosses over a few of the things. Like, he didn't even mention the Embargo Act that is what Jefferson signed, in I think 1805, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about the date, but it was during his administration. You pretty much decide on a whim that, hey, I don't want to trade with anyone. Like, not Britain, not France. Like, I'm not trading with any country whatsoever, which is insane. There's no way you're going to be able to build your economy if the product that you make can't go anywhere. Like, yeah, people could buy it within the country, but you're making any, you're really not making any money, and it's killing shipping, which, pissed off the Northeast, and it's also pissing off his southern brethren, because now their cotton that they export to Britain and France and all these other countries, now they can't even do that. It was a terrible idea. So again, yes, Thomas Jefferson, again, up there with one of the, as a founding father, Declaration of Independence, all of that, creating West Point, lowering the national debt, Louisiana Purchase. Amazing achievements, of course. That alone should put him close to S tier. However, with how bad the Embargo Act was, I really thought about putting him in the B category, because that was an act that was terrible, and he knew it was bad. You want to know why? Because as soon as he left office, he didn't want anything to do with the presidency. He hated it. He even put on he even wanted his epitaph to not mention anything about the presidency, which is remarkable. Because for a lot of people, that's the highest achievement. That doesn't get any better than being the president of the United States. But he hated it so much that, like, he just didn't even have it on his epitaph, which is just bonkers. So for me, I struggled with this. If there was like a B+ category, I'd put him in there. But I think I will be in agreement. I'll put him at A. But it's not it's not something I'm really comfortable with. Just like he wants to, excoriate Adams for the Alien Sedition Acts, I'm going to excoriate Jefferson for the Embargo Act, because that was a terrible idea. It's like, you can't, if you kill the American economy, it's going to cause problems down the road, and it's going to piss off a lot of people, which is what happened with France and Britain. Everyone was pissed. No one liked this act. 0 people liked it. This is a terrible idea. And Jefferson pushed that particular act through and pretty much, kill the economy during the time that it was a law. Terrible idea. And for that, I should have put him at B, but yeah, I'll leave it at A, because his other accomplishments are just far too important to just, shrug off. But personally, I would say B+. And as much as I want to talk about the fact, you know what? Actually, I'll take that back. I'll put him at B, because I forgot about the other reason why I would rank him. Because yes, his character wasn't the best. Also, you had a chance as a Southern president to put your stamp on slavery. I know George Washington as the first president. Yes, he was the first Southern president. I understand that. But at the time, the country was being established, and it's very hard to say anything about slavery at the time, because the country is just being formed. Like, you need as much stability as possible. So I understand why he didn't say anything about slavery at the time. I don't excuse him for it, but I get it. With Jefferson, you could have made a statement. You could have been like, slavery is a moral evil. We need to shut slavery. It needs to die. He himself hated it, slavery. That's what he said. But he had no problems, having plenty of slaves on his plantation. He had no problem sleeping with his slaves, which I think one of them, Sally Hemings, was his half-sister or whatever, I believe. He had no problems with that. But when it came to his own economic, benefit, He's like, I can't get rid of the slaves. You can, you just don't want to because it's economically beneficial to you. You could have started that train on eliminating slavery as an institution, but you didn't. And the country was at a point where you could have made policy on that. You could have started making policy on that. And I'm sure his rationale was like, I don't want to antagonize the Southern politicians. That's fine, because I'm pretty sure even a lot of them were like, yeah, slavery is a moral evil, but we need it economically. You could have gotten that ball rolling, but you didn't. So for that and the Embargo Act, I will have to demote him to B. But mind you, this is like a B plus A minus type of situation. This isn't like, oh yeah, he's a flat B. Like, nah, there's an in-between grade between B and A for this particular ranking, I would have done it. And I could probably still do it, but it's just, I don't want this, I'd rather keep it solid. So even though it's a B, it's more of a B plus A minus situation.
James Madison, I believe. Yeah, let's see, where's he at? There's Madison right here. So Madison's another one of those guys who did a lot more, I think, for the country before he became president than most people realize. He's also probably one of the most immensely qualified people that's ever been president. This guy served in pretty much every place of government.
That is true. He's served in literally every capacity that you could in the government. And yes, he was eminently qualified. There wasn't a better candidate for Madison, but as president,
Government, you can imagine. Insane. Thank you so much. 150 euros, asserting dominance. I appreciate all that you do for this channel, and I don't just mean because you donate large sums of money from time to time, but just one of the most important members of this community. Can't wait to get to Europe and meet you for the first time. Watching from North London in the UK. Awesome. I'm glad to hear that, Tom. I can't wait to get to your country. S is like super, it's like above A, I guess you could say. Yeah, Martin's got a good point. If you start judging character, it gets really interesting. So, Madison.
No, you have to, because, again, like I said, a politician, any politician's personality, their character, is going to, determine how they, run their administration. You cannot just remove the personality from the president. And again, going back to the basketball analogy, it's like trying to remove athleticism from a basketball player or any athlete. You can't do that. It's an inherent part of, what they do, what makes them great or bad or whatever the case may be. President's personality for sure plays a role. Their personality, their, character for sure plays a role. And yeah, there were plenty of presidents who were unscrupulous characters that ended up being pretty good presidents, for their accomplishments, but at the same time, that's not something that you can discount, because, like I said, going back to someone like Andrew Jackson, it's an inherent part of who they are. That his personality dictated how he ran his administration. Period. There is no any historian worth his salt knows that Andrew Jackson ruled by the sheer force of his will. So.
Let's talk about Madison. Madison is president during World War II. I believe he's the last president to actually lead troops in the field as commander-in-chief. Nothing particularly outstanding, I don't think, but I think he was a pretty decent president. I'll give him a solid B. I would love to hear some of you and your opinions on these folks as we get to them. So let me know who you think. 669 now. We're approaching 700 people on the stream, which is fantastic. That's very cool. So yeah, let me know your thoughts about some of these. I think Madison's a solid B. Who's my favorite English monarch? Edward III. Big fan of Edward III. Big fan of George VI, just because of the kind of guy he was and what he overcame. Wilberto, awesome. I'm glad you're enjoying it. You're watching from Tehran. Very cool, Amir. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, War of 1812. Did I say something else? I meant War of 1812 for sure. His wife, Dolly, rescues the painting of George Washington, the famous painting of George Washington from the White House before it gets burned. But yeah, Madison, I think, was a pretty solid president. Why didn't Hamilton become president? Number one, because he got shot before he ever had the chance. Number two, because of the Mariah Reynolds scandal. He was kind of the first big sex scandal in American history, and he really shot his chances of ever becoming president in the foot when he did that. Hello from South London. Very cool. Who's my favorite president? We'll get.
Yeah, I was gonna say about Hamilton. He was very divisive as an individual. Like, you either loved him or hated him. He was probably one of the first American politicians where people, felt that type of way about Hamilton. So I do think he would have been immensely popular and a very good president, but it would have been tough. It would have been tough to get the amount of votes that he would have needed to win, because, like I said, you either loved him or hated him. There was really no in between.
To that, you'll kind of see. All right, so we're on to James Monroe.
So, on Madison, he put him at what was it? He put him at B, right? I am gonna put Madison at C, and I really should put him at D. The only reason I won't is because Madison's accomplishments, again, as a founding father, I think he helped to write the Federalist Papers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, did he write the Federalist? Actually, give me a second. Sorry, I am genuinely curious about this. Yeah, Federalist Papers were a collection of 85 articles and essays written by Hamilton and Madison. Yeah. So all that stuff. And again, his accomplishments as a founding father cannot be overstated. But he was a terrible wartime president, and we did lose the War of 1812, despite what a lot of people think, that we somehow won, and that the Battle of New Orleans was like us sticking it to the Brits, even though the war was pretty much over. There was that battle. That's funny. That battle literally did not need to happen, but of course they didn't know, because it took time for messages to get across, because there's no telephone. But yeah, that battle was like, yeah, great, we won, but the war was already over. America and Britain already, America and England, sorry, I should say, already made peace with one another. But we lost that war. Madison almost got shot. The Brits came into DC and burned it down. So I'm like, cool. I mean, I'm sure, like, yeah, War of 1812 happened. We lost that war. He was a terrible wartime president. He did pass the Tariff of 1816, which is the first time we actually made an attempt to protect, American goods internationally. So I will give him credit for that. But I'd have to put him at a C. I can in no way justify how bad he was as a wartime president. Like, he was straight doo-doo. Like, what other president has allowed a foreign nation to come into our land, beat the brakes off of us, and burn our capital? No one, except for Madison. So I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how qualified you were. When you were president, you stunk up the joint really bad. The only reason you even got reelected because there was essentially no one else to run against you, and your wife is immensely popular, which probably helped. So yeah, Dolly Madison, she's an interesting figure. She's really the one that should have been on those front lines. Yeah, she was a remarkable figure, and now if I was ranking her, I'd definitely put her up A or S, just based on her protecting the stuff in the White House. But yeah, as for Madison, he gets a C. I'm sorry, just trash as a president. And the only reason I don't rank him lower is because of his accomplishments before he became president. So
president, we'll get to that. You'll kind of see. All right, so we're on to James Monroe. Here he is right here. I just visited his grave a couple weeks ago when I was in Richmond. He's buried in Richmond. Monroe's another one of those guys that I think was solid, but again, didn't do anything outstanding that really blows me away. Again, a really solid background, eminently qualified for president. Early on, the best route to becoming president was Secretary of State. All three of these guys, the third, fourth, and fifth presidents of the U.S., had all been Secretary of State. That was kind of the role to have as a stepping stone to becoming Secretary of State. Samuel, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for your support, sir. We are over 700 people watching. This is very, very cool. RTube, I appreciate that everybody's got different opinions on this stuff. Andrew, just to kind of burst your bubble on that, I have a personal policy on the channel of not getting into post-1990s politics, so I won't be ranking the 4 most recent presidents. Monrovia is named after him because they created a colony in Africa called Liberia that they were hoping eventually to repopulate with freed slaves to send them back, because they didn't feel they would ever be able to kind of be seen as equal in America. And Bunker Housing and anyone else, please keep modern politics and opinions on people like Trump and Obama out of it. All right, let's move on. We are on to, who was that? Monroe. So we're on to John Quincy.
Yeah, so with James Monroe, I don't know if he mentioned it. I don't think he did, but the Monroe Doctrine is what he's most known for. Basically letting other countries know, hey, you handle your side on the Eastern Hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere is ours. Don't come in our hemisphere. You know, we will fight. Things will go down. And it's the first time that America really asserted itself internationally, because with Washington, they assumed a stance of neutrality, like, hey, we don't want to get involved, but we're still going to trade with everyone, but we don't want to get involved. And of course, that pissed off the Brits and the French, because they're like, hey, they're making all this money, and they're profiting off of us fighting each other, and they're like, no, this needs to stop. But again, that's another story. But yeah, it essentially that's the first time America's actually made a stance internationally of any note, of any repute. And he was a part of the era of good feelings, where essentially there was no party lines whatsoever. Like, it was a very harmonious time up until 1824, which that is honestly, that particular point, 1824, is when modern day politics was, in my eyes, born. But I'll get to that in a little bit. But yeah, he was fairly instrumental. Foreign policy wise, he was really good. Domestically, he was pretty good. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, and of course, as he mentioned, the whole Liberia thing, where he tried to have a colony for Africans in America, or African Americans in America, to go back to Africa. At least they could live there, because a lot. It wasn't just Monroe. Pretty much every white person in America at the time was like, either black people were inferior, or that we just can't live with them because we're completely different, and they'll never get the same treatment that they would back in Africa. So I, again, and this goes back to Jefferson as well, is like, you could have done something about slavery, but with Monroe, at least they tried. The Compromise of Missouri. Sorry, not the Compromise of 1820, the Missouri Compromise. It was an attempt by the government to actually do something, even though it was a Band-Aid essentially on a gaping wound, or a wound that was getting bigger. At least there was something done about slavery, trying to contain it, at least not let it progress any further. So I do give him bonus points for that, because he actually tried to do something and not just be like, hey, yeah, I don't like slavery, but I'm gonna bang my half sister, and I'm gonna not let any of my slaves go because I need them economically. So I'll give Monroe credit. And yeah, he was he was pretty good. Although he did have and now that I'm looking at my notes, I'm like, I remember writing this. Like, he did have an interesting foreign policy when it came to specific countries. With Great Britain, he didn't want to antagonize. He wanted to settle and stuff. Let's see what I wrote. Yeah, but when it came to countries like Spain, who he knew were pretty weak, yeah, we can expand. We can be a little bit more aggressive, which is very interesting. And I think Florida at the time was, I I remember, I think it was like Andrew Jackson went into Florida, pretty much just took it from the Spanish, and Monroe was like, all right, cool. so so yeah, I mean that did happen during Monroe's time, and that made Jackson even more popular than he already was. And pretty much by the time Monroe left office, like, yeah, he didn't rock the boat. He didn't do anything where, you know, we have to be embarrassed as a nation about, which honestly in modern day politics is there's a lot to be said about that. Of course, I won't delve into modern politics because I do want to follow his format. But yeah, I do think Monroe deserves a little bit more credit than what a lot of people give him. They're just like, oh yeah, Monroe just, you know, whatever, he took advantage of a peaceful time. It's like, sure, but he did accomplish things, and he was a founding father. So for me, where is, yeah, there he is. I will put him at A. I do think he's a very good president, and he definitely deserves a lot more credit than people give him. But considering he only did good, like there wasn't anything bad that he did other than, you know, compromising on slavery. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people, I'm sure there's plenty of honestly African American people that are people like, yeah, he compromised on slavery, he didn't try to end it, and I get that. But it was the first time that slavery was even acknowledged as a problem, not as like, you know, yeah, that's slavery. Just people knew it was a problem, but they saw it as more of an economic problem than a moral one. But as, you know, after Monroe, like slavery becomes more and more intense as a political issue. It slowly starts to build until, you know, the late 1840s, early to pretty much from the mid 1840s up until the Civil War. Slavery, the intensity of slavery as an issue just exploded. So, but personally, I think Monroe is much better than what people give him credit for. I mean, it takes a lot to not piss off people internationally and maintain, you know, and maintain things domestically. And very few presidents have managed to do both, and Monroe was one of them. So I'll give him an A.
Adams. I think John Quincy Adams is another one of those people who's insanely qualified. You know, some of our early presidents had some really serious, solid background. John Quincy Adams wins the first, or I shouldn't say the first, one of the most difficult presidential elections there's ever been. It's him versus Andrew Jackson. It was ugly. It was a really ugly race. Ohio presidents ranking. Unfortunately, most of our Ohio presidents were not great. And Joseph Meyer, I 100% agree. You really can't fairly judge recent presidents. John Quincy Adams, I kind of feel B, but I'm going to go C. One-term president, did some decent things. I think most of his achievements, like John Adams, come before he's president. As a diplomat, he was a really good diplomat. Zenacity, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. We're approaching 800 people in the stream, which is amazing. All right, so John Quincy Adams there. Who are we on to? We're on to Andrew Jackson.
John Quincy Adams, yeah, he had no chance. After the election in 1824, where Adams and Jackson pretty much went back and forth. Like, I think Adams basically insinuated that his wife was a bigamist, which was true. She did marry Andrew Jackson before she divorced her husband. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the worst crime in the world. But Jackson's like, yo, this man pimped for the Tsar of Russia. Completely false. But, you know, people loved Andrew Jackson. Like, it is hard to state how popular Andrew Jackson was during this time. He was stupidly popular. Like, how people view Reagan in the 80s and how people view Trump, or how Republicans view Trump today, or, you know, when Trump was elected and throughout his term, that's pretty much how people viewed Andrew Jackson. They loved him, and he actually won the popular vote. But he didn't win the required amount, which is why the Speaker of the House, who was Henry Clay, got to determine who would be the next president. So, Henry Clay and Andrew Jackson didn't exactly see eye to eye, and the other candidates had I think one of them suffered a stroke, Crawford, I think. And Henry Clay was like third place, I believe. Yeah. So essentially, the choice was either between Jackson or Adams, and pretty much bargain was struck where if Clay railroads Adam into railroads, if he gets Adam into office as the president, Adams will make him Secretary of State. Because remember, like he said, Secretary of State was the way to become a president. You were Secretary of State, pretty much fast tracking yourself to the presidency. So basically they struck a deal, and everyone knows that the deal was essentially struck because they wasted no time. Like there wasn't even like a thought. Like they didn't wait like a day or two. They just immediately like probably the next day it was like, yep, we're gonna make Henry Clay the Secretary of State. And the Jackson people lost it, especially Andrew Jackson himself, who believed this more than anything, that a corrupt bargain had been struck between Adams and Clay, where essentially, even though he won the popular vote, he didn't get the presidency because these two struck a deal and pretty much got Adams into office. So basically the entirety of Adams's presidency was dealing with Andrew Jackson and his people just, crying corrupt bargain, and he couldn't get anything done. It was, well, I shouldn't say he didn't get anything done. It was very difficult for him to get things done, because he did pass the tariff for abominations. God, I can't speak English right now. Which was a very high, I think it was a very high tariff. Yeah, it was a very high tariff that was pretty much designed to make him look really bad, because everyone hated it. And then, but he on the same note, he did increase trade, in general. So, but I think that was more a product of the economy itself, than anything else. I lost my train of thought. But his greatest legacy was him fighting for anti-slavery, fighting to eliminate slavery. He was a big anti-slavery proponent after he left office, and I think that's really his greatest legacy, that he fought so vociferously. Yes, again, English is hard. to ensure that slavery died as an institution. And he did that up until he died, which again I think was 1848, if I'm not mistaken. But that is his true legacy, honestly. But as a president, where did they rank him at? Yeah, see, I would agree. I would agree. I'd put Adams at C, which is funny because he didn't even pick the right picture for Adams. I'm pretty sure. Yep, that's John Quincy Adams. I don't know who he picked as Martin Van Buren. Is that Martin Van Buren? Pretty sure that's Martin Van Buren. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that's Martin Van Buren. Yeah, he picked the wrong one. But yeah, I would put Adams at C. If we're talking strictly about his anti-slavery, legacy after the presidency, I would put that at A tier, S tier for sure. But as a president, since we're limited to that, put him at C. So.
It would be easy to judge the man on his character, and as far as character goes, I got some real issues with Andrew Jackson as a human being. But yeah, if you guys get into modern politics too much, Insane or somebody else is probably just going to put you in timeout. We're at 8:20 now. This is awesome. So Andrew Jackson, I'm not a fan of, but I think he did a decent job as president in some ways. But then you got the whole Trail of Tears thing. You got him just blatantly ignoring the Supreme Court. Supreme Court issues an order against his administration, and he basically says, okay, they issued their ruling, now let's see them enforce it. And he completely ignores it. So I'm gonna throw Andrew Jackson in at a C. My heart tells me to make him lower, but I'll give him a C. Obedient Moss, we're still just getting started. We just hit number 7. We're on to number 8 now, which I guess would be, is that Martin Van Buren?
Okay, so this particular ranking was one of the rankings that really pissed me off and really wanted me to make this particular video in the first place. And not really because of the ranking, because I can see why he would put Jackson at 6. Because you completely, sir, you completely glossed over the Trail of Tears like it was just some random policy that he enacted. People, Native Americans died, and like hundreds, thousands, like a lot of people died. He had no mercy on any of these tribes. He forced them to walk to their deaths. That is horrifying. That is essentially genocide, basically. Like, yeah, it's not genocide in the classical sense, like let's kill everyone. No, but you're basically walking them to their deaths. You have no mercy on Native Americans. You pretty much force them off of their lands. You pretty much pull in Israel, essentially, and take their lands and basically leave them with nothing. So, and yes, again, you have to take the man's personality into account because that's an inherent part of how he runs his administration. He runs with the force of his will, or he ran with the force of his will. That's not indisputable. That is a fact. Like everyone contemporaries at during that time basically said, yeah, the man essentially runs with the force of his personality. There's no, he's not trying to politicize. He's not using any political, deafness or anything. It's just, I want it done this way. And yeah, if we looked at Andrew Jackson today, we could say that he's certifiably insane. Like truly certifiably insane. But I will say with Andrew Jackson, I can see why he would rank him at C, because he's the first president that you could truly say, I'm gonna pick up this sword, this executive branch sword, using not a physical sword, obviously. This is more like figurative, this figurative executive branch sword, and actually wielding it. Because a lot of times, a lot of presidents before Jackson didn't really want to utilize the power that they had as president. Andrew Jackson had no such compunction. Again, this is a man who ruled by the force of his personality. So the Trail of Tears, that was all him. Like he said, he basically flat out ignored the Supreme Court. John Marshall, made his ruling. Andrew Jackson said he made his ruling, now let him enforce it. Because he knew the Supreme Court, they really are limited. The only thing they can really do is determine if something's constitutional or not. But if the executive branch, if the legislative branch essentially want this policy enacted, there's not much the Supreme Court could do, even if they say it's unconstitutional. It's just a matter of whether Congress and the president listen to the Supreme Court. And in Andrew Jackson's case, he just didn't, and caused thousands upon thousands of Native Americans to die, which is a sad legacy, just as sad as slavery, if not more. Or I shouldn't say if not more, sorry, I apologize, because slavery was probably the worst legacy in American history, but the Trail of Tears is right there with it in terms of just, allowing Native Americans to die because you wanted their lands. So that right there should put Andrew Jackson at an F. Also, the other thing that really should drive Jackson down is the fact that he pretty much killed the U.S. economy and had no backup plan. He killed the bank, which he's both regarded highly for and also criticized for as well, because you had no backup plan. The Panic of 1837 was essentially due to Andrew Jackson. It had pretty much killed Martin Van Buren's presidency when he took over. Because, Van Buren had to deal with the legacy of that particular decision. He had to deal with the fallout. But Andrew Jackson himself, he didn't like Henry Clay. He didn't like Nicholas Biddle. And once Clay and Biddle got themselves involved in trying to push the bank charter because they wanted to essentially put Jackson in a bad position, Andrew Jackson's like, nah, I'm not doing this. And not only that, I'm not going to wait for the charter to, naturally die out. I'm going to move the money immediately to, state banks. Like, I'm going to kill the bank when it's still in existence. It's like, that's cool, but do you have a backup plan? Or you it's just you're putting in state banks, but there's really no centralized economy anymore. Not in the classical sense. So yeah, that killing the economy and forcing Native Americans to walk to their deaths, two of the worst decisions that he's made as a president. But I will give him points for the succession crisis. When John C. Calhoun was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna secede," and Andrew Jackson's like, "All right, bet you secede. I'm gonna personally take an army, march to South Carolina, and I'll hang you by the first tree I see." All right, not seceding anymore. So I'll give him points for that. And he did reduce we had no national debt with Andrew Jackson as president, so I will give him points for that as well. I think he's I don't know if he's the only president or if he's like one of the very few presidents that pretty much eliminated the national debt. So I'll give him points for that. And he's also the progenitor, which is, when you see my ranking of Andrew Jackson, you're not going to be surprised with why after hear my explanation. But the spoils system, to the victor go to spoils, he's a progenitor of that. I'm going to give my team, the people that supported me, I'm going to give them the lion's share of positions, the best office positions in their states, federally, whatever the case may be. I'm going to give it to my guys who supported me instead of people that were the most qualified. I'm going to give it to my guys. He's a progenitor of that. So that's another demerit. So not only did you walk Native Americans to your death, you killed the economy, and now you're pretty much allowing corruption to occur because you're bringing in people that may not be qualified for the positions that you give them, but they're your buds, they're your friends, whatever the case may be. Those three things alone is why I personally will rank Andrew Jackson. Actually, let me just go. I'm going to rank him F. I'm sorry. As much as I would, as powerful of a person he was, and as popular of a person that he was, they even named an entire age after him, the Age of Jackson, the Jacksonian Age, because, he represented the politics of the common man. And I will say this about Jackson, he's probably one of the few presidents that truly did what the people wanted him to do. Like, a lot of the policies that he did enact were popular with people, with people that weren't in urban areas, weren't in like big city areas. They were popular with the rest of the nation. However, there was really no foresight as to what to do next after you did that particular act, like, the bank. There was no foresight. Now what are you going to do? So, yes, he did do what the people wanted to, but this is really more an indictment, of us as Americans back then, more so than him just doing, just him as a person. But even so, those three things, the Trail of Tears, the killing of the bank, and the spoils system, I have to put him at an F. I'm sorry, I can't justify putting him at a C. And the fact that this man right here just said this Trail of Tears thing like it was just some random policy, or like just people died. This is an act of genocide. Like, it's not a classical act of genocide. It's not how we think of genocide, but people died nonetheless. You walked them to their deaths. You gave them no rest. You moved them to lands that are smaller than what they were accustomed to, and you did it illegally. It wasn't, your own Supreme Court said, no, we cannot do this. This is unconstitutional. And you just flat out ignored what they had to say. So I'm putting Andrew Jackson at F. He was a complete monster, certifiably insane. If a psychologist looked at him today, he's not trash human being. Trash human being. And really, there's nothing more to say. I think I've spoken my piece on Andrew Jackson. So,
yeah, it would be Martin Van Buren. We do have two pictures of John Quincy Adams here. That is Martin Van Buren, by the way. Thank you, guys. Here's John Quincy Adams. Let's throw him up there. This is Van Buren right here. So I realized it afterwards. Do I think Madison's Federalist Papers opinions cause a lot of our modern political gridlock? Not necessarily. And remember, Alexander Hamilton wrote most of the Federalist Papers. It is still the number one most quoted thing by the Supreme Court when ruling, the Federalist Papers. So they refer to them regularly. Abraham, thank you so much. Washington owned slaves, as did a number of other presidents. Put Roosevelt B for bull moose or S for shoot. How long do I think the USA will last? I'm a little concerned about that right now. But all right, Van Buren. Again, one of those presidents that I don't feel was outstanding, but wasn't necessarily all that bad either. But we're about to get into a stretch of U.S. presidents that are pretty terrible. Some of the worst we've had, unfortunately. Sam, thank you so much. There needs to be a Theodore Roosevelt tier above S tier because he is a legend. I can't argue with that. Absolutely is a legend. I'm going to throw Van Buren in the C tier because we're about to start populating the D, I'm afraid. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to create one more tier. I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to add a new row here. And we're going to call this one incomplete. Because there's just not enough information to be able to fairly judge. And the first person who goes into that is William Henry Harrison. The man was president for a month, and he was...
So on Van Buren, not going to go too much into detail. Obviously, he had to deal with the Panic of 1837. Couldn't really do anything. Pretty much had to deal with the fallout of Andrew Jackson's decision to kill the bank. So he had no chance of re-election. That was fairly evident. Funny part is, the Whigs, if they had known that, they would have just ran Henry Clay instead of running William Henry Harrison. But they wanted that old, military leader to, they were using the Andrew Jackson playbook essentially to ensure that, their man got elected, that they got the power. But reality, they really should have ran Henry Clay because Martin Van Buren was so bad. Honestly, there's nothing that he could have done. And he also continued Jackson's policy with, Native Americans, just, shunting them aside to, different areas where, they could go live. But he wasn't as bad. He wasn't as determined to make Native Americans suffer, but that's still a thing. I'd put him at D because, yeah, there's nothing that he did of any reputable note. And maybe I'm being hard. It wasn't really his fault that the Panic of 1837 happened. But you didn't really do anything to alleviate the issue because I'm pretty sure that panic lasted for like a few years after 1837. I think it lasted until 1941 or 1841, 1842. So Van Buren, I'm giving him a D. Wasn't really anything. And as for William Henry Harrison, of course, where is he? Is that him? Can't tell if that's him. Well, let me make sure. Yeah, that's him. I'm just gonna put him incomplete because, well, he only lived like a month into his presidency. Maybe you shouldn't talk in the rain for like 2-3 hours, making your inaugural speech. But hey, a little late to give that man that advice. So, yeah.
was sick for most of it. He really just didn't do anything. So it's impossible to fairly judge him, I think. Van Buren has the sexiest haircut. Yeah, it's a pretty epic look that he's got going on there, isn't he? Taft versus the scale, who wins? We're at 882. We're about to hit 900 people. Hit that like button if you haven't already and subscribe too. I would appreciate.
We have a lot of sayings about work. Like, there's no...
Appreciate that. John Michael Chance, I believe that the national debt was last at zero under Andrew Jackson, which is one of the good things that happened during his presidency, I think. 928. Oh man, this is awesome. All right, so yeah, not a lot to say about William Henry Harrison. He dies, and the guy who replaces him as president, we're on to, what are we on to, number 10? So I guess we're on to John Tyler now, right? Where is John Tyler? Let's look around here. There's John Tyler right there. John Tyler, I think, was a decent president, but again, he's in that stretch of time when there's just not much that you can say good or bad either way about things. I've got a green screen Mountain Dew. Yes, I do. That always happens. What are your thoughts about John Tyler as president, those of you who are familiar? Martin Van Buren looks like a crazy scientist. I cannot disagree.
Yeah, he does.
But
He really
a mad
does.
scientist. Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Almost 1,000 people watching, Bill. You're right. That is crazy. Grant Johnson, thank you. Empire tier list. I am going to get to that. If these are going to be this popular when I do these streams, you can bet I'm going to do more of them for sure. So, did John Tyler get us Texas? No, that was. Or wait. Wasn't that Polk?
No, it was Tyler.
That was Polk, wasn't it?
Tyler got Tyler.
Yeah, I'm so torn on John Tyler.
Which caused issues, but
Yeah, I'm gonna go C. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but yeah, pretty mediocre. As Orange List Pulp Juice says, he's the epitome of mediocre. Texas got us, Texas. The real story of this time was Henry Clay. Stanley, I agree, 100%. Plague of Shadows, thank you so much. Howdy from Texas, very cool. I'm so glad to hear you're finding some success on all that stuff. It was Polk. See, that's what I thought. Polk was president during the
pretty sure it was Tyler. Got
the Mexican-American War. And Polk is right here. He's got the epic mullet going.
So with Tyler, the funny part about him, he was basically a Democrat disguised as a Whig. He advocated states' rights far more than the rights of the central government, which kind of caused issues because it's kind of like the genesis of a lot of states being like, hey, we really don't need to be in this union anymore. We have a chance to back out, out of this union between the North and the South, essentially. Now that's the idea that was probably forming, because obviously you had the secession crisis and with John C. Calhoun, but but yeah, the fact that you had a president that said states had more rights, more autonomy than the federal government is going to cause issues later on, as you'll definitely see. But yeah, he did get the Webster-Ashburn Treaty passed. He did. I think I'm pretty sure it was him that annexed Texas, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I'm sorry, I gotta, and I know Wikipedia is not exactly the most reliable site, but I am fairly certain that was, let's see. Yeah, in late February 1845, the House approved a joint resolution offering annexation to Texas by a substantial margin. The Senate approved by a bare 27-25 majority. 3 days before the end of his term, Tyler signed the bill into law. So yeah, it was barely before he left office, but he is the one that annexed Texas. I know a lot of people have that misconception that Polk was the one that did it. Nah, it was Tyler, which is remarkable considering this man was excommunicated from his own party. He really didn't have a party. He was known for being the man without a party. He essentially ruled, he essentially ran the presidency as an independent, which he did manage to get some stuff done. But I will give him a C as well. I do think that, and honestly, a C is pretty good considering the difficulties he had to face. So I'm not going to judge him too harshly. Was it? Yeah, it was this one, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I'll give him a C. For sure.
Going on. He's one of the Tennessee presidents. Him and Andrew Jackson both are buried in Nashville. So Polk, I'm going to give a solid B. I think during this stretch, the 1840s and 1850s, Polk was probably the best president we had in that time. I am familiar with Arthur St. Clair a little bit. Polk annexes Texas. He wins the Mexican-American War. I think he did some pretty good things for the president, or for the presidency, for the country. I don't think he did anything particularly terrible for the presidency, so I'll give him a solid B. And he's the only B in this 20-year or so stretch. Texas history, we'll get into some Texas history at some point. What state has made the best presidents? That's interesting because I'm an Ohioan and we are tied with Virginia with having the most presidents, but most of Ohio's presidents have been mediocre at best. Isaac, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to put Grover Cleveland on the list once. Some people have been asking about that. All right, we are on.
So with Polk, I actually will put him at A, and I'll tell you why. Wait, what was Polk? Where is he? Oh, yeah, that one. Where the is he? Polk, where you at, sir? Oh. Yeah, I'll put him at A, and I'll tell you why. Very rarely do you have a president that says, I'm going to do, 3-4 things. I'm only going to run one term, but I want these 3-4 things accomplished, and I'm done. He managed everything that he wanted to do, he managed to get done. And that is remarkably rare for a president, especially a president that flat out said, I'm not running again. This is it. One term, and I'm done. So he managed to, I'm trying to remember. I know the misconception is he managed to annex Texas, which, again, I just showed it was actually Tyler, but, Polk kind of gets credit for that. As an expansionist president, he is arguably the greatest, or one of the greatest expansionist presidents that we've ever had. The whole concept of manifest destiny, is pretty much solidified during his era. The whole sea to shining sea. That's pretty much Polk made that a reality. With the Mexican-American War, obviously you won that war. We got a crap ton of territory, which included California. Mexico had to concede a lot of territory because of that loss. He also settled with Great Britain over Oregon, if I'm recalling it right. That line, I believe, that separates Oregon from Canada. I'm pretty sure that was Polk. So they managed to get that settled. This is 48th parallel, yeah. And then he did reduce the tariff with the Walker tariff of 1846. And that's something he wanted to do. He wanted to lower tariffs, so there wasn't as much, protection. So everything that he wanted to do, he did get done. He did get accomplished. So I'm gonna put him at an A personally, because it's very rare for presidents to say, I'm doing these things, and that's that. Of course, modern day presidents, we would love for them to do what they say, but it's very hard, with the political climate the way that it is now, for that to happen. I'm not gonna expound on that, but that's pretty much where we're at, modern day wise. But during Polk's time, he said he wanted to get these things accomplished. He got them accomplished. But in doing so, we pretty much opened up that wound of slavery again. Because now you have all this territory, now you have to figure out what to do with that territory. So now it's like, okay, you got all this territory, and it's really in the southern regions, so is slavery allowed to expand west, or do we, pretty much contain it? And that's more or less what the main question was once we got all this territory from the Mexicans. And then, of course, we still had the territory from the Louisiana Purchase that Jefferson was a part of, that we still had to more or less kind of divvy out. So that was going to play an immense role in the years to come, and be a source of a lot of conflict. But Polk I would put at A, because he got everything done.
Now we did Polk, so we're on to Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor's, again, one of those people. He's got a really short term in office. I think he was decent.
Oh, forgot to mention independent treasury. That was the fourth thing that he wanted, because he did say he wanted to do 4 things, and he wanted to get all 4 things done before he left office. Polk, the independent treasury, which didn't exactly solve the problem, but at least it was pretty much a precursor to the Federal Reserve. So we did have some form of centralized banking, and that's what the independent treasury essentially was. And Polk managed to get that through. So that's something I wanted to add.
But he was a pretty hands-off president. I'm going to throw him. I'm torn between C and D on Taylor, but I'll love to hear your thoughts on this. So let me know what you guys think about Zachary Taylor. Kentucky did have Lincoln, but Kentucky also had Jefferson Davis. We are over 1,000. That is amazing. I've never had more than 600 viewers on a stream before, and we are over 1,000. This is fantastic. I'm so excited. So C. We got a lot of C's here. He did. Yeah, I agree. Ray Earth. He did not abuse his presidential powers. You're talking about Washington? Yeah. All right. We're gonna throw Zachary Taylor in at C. It's gonna be downhill from here.
Yeah, I'll put him at C. He didn't really get him. He didn't really. I honestly wanted to put him in incomplete because he was only there for like a year, and he didn't really get a chance to get much accomplished. I do think he could have been, because he was a military man. I do think he would have. And this is not to say all military people make great presidents, but I do think he would have instilled a little bit of, stability, considering how contentious a lot of these issues were. But. And he, as a Southern man, he flat out said he did not want slavery to expand, period. Unfortunately, it was, he died because he decided to eat healthy, which is freaking hilarious. Hey, man, I'm going to eat some cherries and drink some milk, and, that's a good meal, right? Nope. Gastroenteritis, dead. Which is just, yeah, for all you healthy eaters, that's what happens. But yeah, with Taylor, it wasn't much that he managed to get accomplished. I'm trying to remember. He did manage to have the Claim-Bolger Treaty, which was essentially a precursor to the Panama Canal, essentially saying that, hey, we're going to build a canal in this particular area in the next, 99 years or something, within the next 99 years. And America has exclusive rights or whatever to build that specific canal. So yeah, he did manage to get that done, but again, because he died so early, didn't really get a chance to enhance or detract from his legacy. So I'll put him at C. I will definitely, yeah. I think he could have been good, but he didn't really get a chance to do anything with his legacy because he died so quickly into his administration. No, now the bad ones.
I'm afraid. So Zachary Taylor dies in office. He is succeeded by Millard Fillmore. Millard Fillmore is another one of those people that's just very meh for me. The Great Northern War will be coming. Extra history, I will definitely get into that. Would Davis even count? No, he wasn't president. I'm just saying that you got to blame Kentucky for Jefferson Davis too. Millard Fillmore for me, who's A tier so far. Just we've got Washington S and Thomas Jefferson A. There will be more coming that way. So Compromise of 1850. Yeah, Taylor's a tough one for me, and I kind of agree with Sexy Beast. I'm gonna go D for Millard Fillmore. So, Washington's S, which is above A.
Fillmore, I'm going with F. I cannot. Hold on, what did he look? Yeah, that's. I know what a lot of these presidents look like. I just, looking at the picture on his video tells you to, find the pictures on this one. So, but yeah, Fillmore, F. I'm sorry. It's just, there's no way for me to, say anything different, because the Compromise of 1850, yes, that was passed during his administration. However, it helped one of the because basically the Compromise of 1850 was an omnibus bill. It was basically a bunch of bills into one mega bill, and one of the bills was the Fugitive Slave Act, which allowed southern slave hunters to go into northern territories and get the slaves, or get runaway slaves and bring them back to their owners, and with no due process of law or anything. They were free to just go and find runaway slaves and bring them back. And sometimes they didn't even do that. They just picked up a black man on the street. It was like, no, you're a slave. No one's gonna believe a black man even back then. Pick him up, take him to the South, and sell him off as a slave. So that bill was very unpopular, and the fact that it was even in the Compromise of 1850 was just, again, another Band-Aid. And by this point, it's a necrotic wound. This wound that is slavery is pretty much gonna, destroy the nation. But they're like, yeah, let's just put this Band-Aid on and see what happens. you know, I'm sure everything will be fine. I'm sure there will be no problems with the compromise. Like slavery, like the issue of slavery is going to die down. Oop. Yeah, that Fugitive Slave Act was just complete trash, and Fillmore was a very weak president. Just trash president, period. I will not be as kind. Honestly, the next president after Fillmore, though, I will show a little bit of kindness to, and you'll see why. But Fillmore himself, nah, I'm not giving him a pass. Sorry.
Buchanan, not the To Catch a Predator guy. We are over 1,000. That's crazy. I know. Okay, so after Millard Fillmore comes Franklin Pierce, who, boy, he's another one of those ones that's so tough to judge. And I'm going to put him at D. I think he'd have done a lot better, but boy, Franklin Pierce, for me, is such a sad story, and we've talked about this recently. Wellesley, what I'm doing is I'm just basically ranking these on how I think they impacted the country. Was their presidency good for America? Did it have a positive impact on America and on our history, or a negative one? Not necessarily on whether I like them personally, or whether I agree with them, or whether I think they're...
Now, on my end, when I say a president's trash or he's amazing, it's not necessarily whether I like them or not, even though it sounds like that. It's just based off of their legacies. Like, their legacies were complete either garbage or really good or whatever. Like someone like Andrew Jackson, who, yes, he is a complete monster. I'm speaking specifically in terms of his legacy, and I gave you the reasons why. You know, the 3 main reasons why I put Andrew Jackson where I put him at an F. But it has mainly to do with their legacies as a president. It's like, yeah, there are plenty of presidents that I'm sure were like Thomas Jefferson. He had him at A. I put Jefferson at B, but it wasn't because of how he was as a person. It mainly had to do with him not doing much for the institution of, or not doing anything against slavery and the Embargo Act, which I explained earlier in this video. But yeah, it's not personally. There's a lot of these presidents, like, you know, there's some that I do like a lot, and there's some that I don't like. In terms of like how he wielded power, yeah, I can respect. I actually like, you know, how Andrew Jackson, you know, wielded his power, because, you know, it's the first time that we had an executive, you know, we had the executive branch assert that type of power. I did like that, but I cannot, you know, I cannot discount the Trail of Tears and, you know, everything that he did. So it's just, when I say trash, I'm talking about their legacies, not necessarily if I like them as a person or if I don't like them as a person. So I just wanted to clarify that. But
a person of good character. Pierce is on his way to becoming president. He's on his way to Washington to be sworn in. There's a terrible train accident. His young son is basically decapitated right in front of him in this accident.
Sad story.
And he basically just drank himself into a stupor for his entire presidency. Understandably so. His only son. Just brutal. And yeah, Cole, according to most polls I've seen done, Franklin Pierce is considered to be our hottest president. Yeah, Secretary of State Hillary was Secretary of State before her presidential run. Who's in S tier so far? Just George Washington. Okay, so we're on to...
So again, with Pierce, with the tragedy that befell him, I'm not gonna... Because, I mean, that's hard, man. Like, you're on a train, your child essentially gets decapitated right in front of your eyes. And not only that, you try to prevent your wife to see said decapitation, and she sees it, and... Yeah, that pretty much killed, you know, any chance of him being any type of good president. And again, excuse me. He, you know, that personal tragedy can affect anyone, and especially a tragedy like that where you see your child die right in front of your eyes. That's, you know, I don't think any person could get over that. So for that, I'll give him a D. I won't rank him harshly, like I know a lot of historians and stuff tend to do. There wasn't much that he could have done. He did the Kansas Nebraska, that did happen during his administration, but at that point I think he was just, I'll sign whatever, I'm not gonna argue. He did enforce the Fugitive Slave Act, which again, that's tough. That's tough. Like, that alone would probably want me to put him in an F, but considering the personal issues that he dealt with and the fact that he drank himself to death because, he was dealing with the death of his son, and he found no way to do it other than hit the bottle. Shit, what am I, sorry. But I will say there is one thing that he did do now that I'm looking at my notes. He did try to do something about the spoils system. Wasn't very effective because at that point no one will listen to anyone. So at that point, when you were president, there wasn't really much you could do during his time and James Buchanan's time. There wasn't really much because no one's gonna listen anymore. But he did try to get the ball rolling on dealing with civil service and the spoils system. So, yeah, honestly, I'm just looking for any reason to not put him to an F. But, personal tragedy and the fact that he did try to, he did try to combat the spoil system and civil service issues. I'll give him points for that. So, yeah, I'll give him a D.
James Buchanan, who I will easily throw in as our first F on my list. Buchanan was a brutally awful president.
I'm not even going to waste time. I agree with him wholeheartedly. Buchanan, just on the fact that you allowed the southern states to secede, you don't get a pass. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter what you do. You allowed secession to happen. You allowed the Civil War to even be a thing. You get an F, period. You didn't even try to stop the southern states to secede. So, F. That's not even going to elaborate. Just, yeah, you get an F.
Secession begins under him. He was from Pennsylvania up until Joe Biden. He was the only president from Pennsylvania, which still fascinates me because of how important Pennsylvania was to the early history, especially of the United States. An automatic, talking about his wife. His wife actually believed that it was the presidential election that caused their son was punishment for him becoming president. But Buchanan just did everything wrong in those 4 years he was in office, leading up to the Civil War. Just brutal, absolutely brutal.
There was a saying I remember that Buchanan told Abraham Lincoln when he took over. He's like, if you're as happy to become president as I am happy to leave the presidency, then you'll be the happiest man in the world. Which, yeah, as the U.S. president, I don't think you get much of a chance to be happy, considering you're probably the hardest worker, because you have to deal with all these policies. So yeah.
All right, Abraham Lincoln, easy S for me.
He doesn't even need to expound. Abe Lincoln, my favorite president. But even then, even if he wasn't, S tier, brought the country together. Nothing needs to be said. The only sad part is he never got to go through with Reconstruction the way he wanted to, because some, jack off wanted to kill him because he was sad that the South lost. The history of African Americans here in the United States could have been much, much different if Lincoln was alive throughout the entirety of his second term to see Reconstruction through. But yeah, Lincoln, there's not much that needs to be expounded upon. He pretty much kept the country together in the Civil War. He freed the slaves with the Emancipation. Well, he set in motion for the freeing of slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation. And then the 13th Amendment actually making it official on June 19th. And then allowing black people the right to vote. Penalty. Sorry, I'm trying to think. Of course, one of the greatest orators, the Gettysburg Address, his second inaugural address, his House Divided speech. Probably the best orator we've ever had as president. Period. There's not even a contest. People may say Kennedy, no, Lincoln. Not even close. Yeah, he was a political master. Very shrewd politician. Just amazingly gifted at understanding people and understanding how to move pieces. When it came to the game of politics, if you want to know how to be a politician, you pretty much see what Abraham Lincoln did, and it'll work out well for you. Because he was a political master. There's really not much that I could say from a negative aspect. I mean, the stuff that he did as a wartime president, yeah, you could say kind of tyrannical. But again, this is the most important, or this is the greatest war that America's had to deal with, and this is for the very soul of the nation. So I think a few liberties here and there, it's like to ensure that, that America was kept together. I don't mark him down for that. I mean, obviously, I think he's the greatest president, even greater than Washington. Like, no competition. If there's an S+ tier, I probably would have put him there. But Abraham Lincoln, there's nothing that needs to be said. He's one of the greatest. Oh, and he also developed the Freedmen's Bureau to help, try to assimilate African Americans into, regular society. But again, one of the greatest tragedies, him being shot, is that he never got to see through Reconstruction the way he wanted to. And again, the history of African Americans could have been much different. Maybe Jim Crow's never a thing. Maybe we don't even need the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because African Americans have civil rights way before then. Proper civil rights. None of that colored white BS that we saw because of the Jim Crow laws. So, S tier, not even a question.
For me,
in fact, I'll even just fast forward.
And I
'cause
can
there's not
understand
much that needs to be
completely
said.
why some people would not put him there. And I'll be honest, Lincoln's my favorite president. I think, as far as politicians go, he's the most brilliant politician who's ever been president of the United States. Sam, thank you. I appreciate that. The transition from color paintings to black and white photos, and then color photos, it is pretty cool. Lincoln was a brilliant politician. He was a very shrewd politician. People do not realize that sometimes about him. He knew what he was doing when it came to politics, and he knew how to play people. I don't agree with everything he did. I think he did some pretty shady things with the Constitution. But you can't disagree with the results. And my only disappointment with Lincoln is that we didn't get to see what he would have done for the country post-president or post.
Pretty much, him dying before Reconstruction could really start is one of the greatest tragedies. And there are people that discount his legacy. I don't understand why, considering this man did everything in his power to make America a nation for everyone. And yes, maybe his views on slavery weren't as radical at the time as someone like a Thaddeus Stevens or Salmon Chase. But as a politician, as a person, you evolve your viewpoints on things. A lot of politicians don't do that. Abraham Lincoln did. And that's rare for a person to look at themselves and be like, all right, I was wrong about this. I need to change my viewpoint. And Frederick Douglass even said himself, when I was with Abraham Lincoln, he never made me feel that there was a difference in our status. Ever. And this is Frederick Douglass. This is one of the most important black men in the history of America saying this. So you tell me, if he's good enough for Frederick Douglass, I think he's good enough for a lot of people. I think he's doing good he was doing good for black people. And again, like I said, the greatest tragedies you never got to see Reconstruction through. But
Civil War, because I think the whole direction of our country, especially where African Americans are concerned, could have been so completely different if Lincoln had continued to serve. Okay, Andrew Johnson, another super easy F. To me, personally, the worst president we've ever had. In fact, I almost want to create a double or triple F category just for Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson, oh my gosh, what a colossal mistake. And I honestly believe, out of all the presidents we've ever had, did more to damage this country than anyone. Andrew Johnson, brutally awful. He just completely botched Reconstruction. Everything he did was wrong when it came to Reconstruction. And, what do you expect when you put a Southern racist Democrat on the ticket when who is basically pro-slavery and is going to do everything he can to undermine Reconstruction?
With Squarespace, editing and adding pieces.
Just a brute. I can't say enough bad things about him.
Yeah, I mean, he said it pretty much how I would have said it, just complete garbage as a president, as a human being. Just, yeah, he did more to harm, he did more to kill Reconstruction than literally any other president. There's not much that needs to be expounded upon Andrew Johnson. He did nothing good. Like, I actually try to look to see if there's any law that he passed or any act that he passed that benefited the nation. Nothing. Like, between him and Buchanan at least freed slaves. Like, he did it quietly. Not many people know this, but he bought slaves and he freed them quietly, and he didn't make a big issue about it. Andrew Johnson was a flat-out racist and a piece of crap, and not even worth me even elaborating on his legacy. He, like you said, if there was like a F or F plus or whatever, or just the lowest tier, Andrew Johnson's on it. So I'm just going to expedite that process. Not even going to. Yeah. God, there's a lot of Fs.
He was trying his best. Okay, yeah, we could do some generals and stuff at some point. Grant. Okay, let's talk about Grant. Grant usually gets ranked really badly, primarily because of the corruption that took place during his administration that was not personally linked to him. But the problem with Grant, and we have 1,200 people watching, so thank you. That's amazing. And hello, everybody. Grant, I think as far as character goes, I'd put in probably the top 3 as far as presidents we've ever had. A man of incredible character. Incredible character. But his biggest downfall was that he was too trusting of people around him. And that got him into trouble because he trusted people he shouldn't have trusted. So I'm going to rank Grant higher than I think most people would, and I would agree with a lot of people that are saying B for this, because I think Grant actually really did some good things. He creates the Justice Department, which we have to this day. He created it specifically to put down the Klan in the South. Mm-hmm. Probably one of our best presidents when it comes to civil rights that we've ever had. Mm-hmm. He very nearly annexed the Dominican Republic and almost created for the U.S. their first territories in the Caribbean. Did some really good things, I think, as president. But it gets overshadowed by the corruption that happened. But he did. He basically destroyed the Klan in the South. And I think the only reason he couldn't do more in the South is that public opinion turned very sharply against Reconstruction by the middle of his second term. And it made it pretty difficult. Yeah, there are a lot of duplicates down here. I don't know why it did that, but we're going in order, so that won't be an issue. Andrew Jackson,
Grant, I will put him at a B. Yeah. But again, with Thomas Jefferson, I'd say a B plus, A minus tier. I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say he definitely deserves an A or definitely deserves a B. Like if there was an in between tier, like he'd be there. But yes, I think really the main problem with Grant is that he was too trusting. He trusted people that he shouldn't have, and it caused a lot of scandal in his administration, which really could have been avoided. But other than those scandals, like, yeah, character-wise, he's probably one of the best people that we've ever had. Like this man mentions in his video, character-wise, up there with the best. And of course, the point that he makes about, him doing a lot for the civil rights for black people. How could you not? You fought with them. As a general, you saw how hard African Americans fought for their freedom. As a general, how could you not be, someone that's for civil rights? Because you see the valor, you see the strength with which they fight. You kind of have to be. And yes, he killed the KKK, smashed them. Only problem is, literally everyone in the South at that time, anyone that's white, because they had lost so badly, is essentially a KKK member. It may not be the popular opinion, but they just lost their way of life, being able to do whatever they wanted with African Americans. And I'm sorry I keep using African Americans and blacks. Y'all know I'm not trying to, go one way or another, but yeah, the Southern people lost their way of life. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to want their way of life back. And how do you get that way of life? To control the political process. And what do you think they're going to do? Form groups like the KKK. KKK wasn't the only one, but it was the most popular one. But Grant did destroy them. And he did try to push the Reconstruction the way, he did try to... I do think that if Lincoln was alive, Grant would have been the main executioner of the Reconstruction process. And I think Grant's, way of doing Reconstruction was more in line with what Lincoln wanted, as opposed to what the radical congressmen like Thaddeus Stevens and all of them, how they wanted it to be. So I do give him points for that, for his character, for his... it's just, yeah, the fact that he was too trusting, which led to the scandals, is probably what brings him down. And also, I will say another thing with Grant. He did create the first Civil Service Commission, so it was the first time that when you applied for a government job, or you went to go get a government job, you couldn't just walk up to the front. You couldn't just walk up to the White House. He'd be like, "Hey, this man recommended me, so therefore I deserve this job." And the president like, "All right, cool. And here you go. I'll give you this position." You couldn't do that anymore. You needed to actually have some legitimate merit to, for the position that you wanted. And Grant was the first, or he was the one that got that train rolling. So, what? Actually, in fact, I'll even put him at an A. I know people are going to be like, "Oh man, you put Grant over Thomas Jefferson?" Yeah, I will, because again, with Jefferson, you could have stamped slavery out very early, but you chose not to. You chose to put your own interests over the interests of the nation, despite you being a founding father. But Grant being a general, the main general in the Civil War, essentially winning the Civil War for the Union, because he's the only general worth a damn that could even win on a consistent basis. Yeah, he actually fought to ensure that African Americans would have freedom. So for that, I will rank Grant higher than Jefferson, and I will put Grant in the A tier. Yes, he trusted people that he shouldn't have trusted, but ultimately, I think because of what he did, how he is as a person, I will definitely, and this is one of the rare times where I will say, yeah, because I like him personally, I will rank him at this particular tier. Grant, I'll make an exception for. I do like him as a person, and most people would put him at the B or maybe at the C, but I would put him at an A, because the fact that you went above and beyond to ensure African American people had rights, that they could vote, that they could gain political office, ranks you high in my book. So he gets an A.
I kind of was torn between putting him at C or D. All right, so we are on to Rutherford B. Hayes. So there's this stretch here where you've got a bunch of Ohio presidents in a row, and unfortunately none of them were particularly outstanding. But Hayes, Hayes is, I don't think he was awful, but I don't think he was great either, and he kind of got into office through.
That's that Ohio bias coming through, as you can tell with the Ohio State hoodie.
Some pretty shady dealings that happened. I think I'm going to put Hayes at D. They called him Rutherford for a reason, and it didn't have anything to do with what he did while he was president. It was mostly because of how he became president. The 1876 election was just an absolute mess.
Yeah, the election in 1877 probably was just as messy as the one in 1824. I think they had to get like a panel of like 11 people or whatever to figure out who. Like it was even closer than the 1824 one. At least the 1824 one, you can say Andrew Jackson won the popular vote, and there was a bargain that was struck. Obviously, with this, it was pretty much neck and neck, and there was no way to determine who actually won the electoral votes and who won the popular votes. It was that close. Unfortunately, Tilden got the short end of the stick. And I think there was like some. I think one of the judges or whatever couldn't, or one of the 11 people that were going to determine the president. I think he had a bail or whatever, and the person that replaced him was a Republican. So therefore, Hayes won the presidency by the skin of his teeth. But unfortunately, because of that, now he has to deal with the whole Rutherford Hayes. And it's the same thing with John Quincy Adams. There's not much you can get done once you have an entire party just flat out against you, thinking that you're corrupt and that you struck some sort of deal. He did essentially put the kibosh on Reconstruction, which was actually funny thing. I think the main deal is like, well, let you become president, you have to we have to end Reconstruction. You have to kill it. And at that point, public perception on Reconstruction was already waning. People didn't care as much anymore to, ensure that black people got, their due process, that they were allowed to vote, that they were allowed to have political office. People didn't care anymore. They wanted Reconstruction to end. They wanted things to return to normal. Then Hayes was like, all right, I'll end Reconstruction as long as you give me the presidency. Fortunately, after that, not much you can do. It wasn't bad, but he wasn't great either. He just, again, he never really had a chance to do anything substantial because he had to deal with an entire party that just assumed that he struck a deal, which he may or may not have. But me personally, I'll rank him a D. I'll give him a D. Where is good old Rutherford? Yay. All right, on to the next.
So, okay, who are we on to now? We're on to Garfield. Garfield's another incomplete. And as I mentioned the other day in the video that I did, and we have 1,300 people watching now. That's really cool. Thank you to everybody who's watching. Garfield, I think, could have been one of our greatest presidents. We'll never know because he gets shot just 2 months into his term. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance. But he was brilliant. Probably one of our smartest presidents we've ever had. I think incredibly highly of Garfield. I think he would have been great. He's another Northeast Ohio person like myself. But let's go ahead and move on to then Chester Arthur.
So I'll say pretty much after Grant, I did have to do some extensive research. I'm not a big fan of Gilded Age politics, and the presidency was essentially weakened after Grant. Congress essentially had all the power. They're the ones, determining which laws got passed. So there were a lot of presidents that had one term thing. It even got so bad that was the expectation that presidents could only have one term, and that was that. Like, people started expecting that to be the case. That's pretty much how weak the presidency was at that time. And these people that became president, they didn't really do much to enhance the presidency, make it a position that was, was strong. As for Garfield, I'll have to take him at his word. I don't know how brilliant, like, with my research, like, I will say that he did try to fight for African American civil rights, so I'll give him points for that. I will, then I'll also give him points for, he did try to purge corruption in the U.S. Post Office. I think he had a fight with, like, Roscoe B. Conkling, and he won that particular fight and managed to reduce his power, because Conkling was known as, like, a big-time political boss or politician or whatever. So, like, he was on the path to being a really good president. I do agree with him. I do think Garfield would have been a really good president. He could have been. Fortunately, an office seeker that, thought he deserved the position because he wrote some book or some BS like that, or he wrote some pamphlet, like, expounding on Garfield's good qualities. He thought because of that, Garfield won the presidency, and the guy, what's his name, Charles Guiteau or whatever, shot him when he concurred, or when he realized that he was never going to get the position he wanted, which was like some foreign position in Paris. So he shot him, and it pretty much highlighted the whole problem with the whole office seeking, the whole civil service, which started to become more and more of an issue. Basically, there are famous political cartoons saying, "An office or your life." Basically, like, if you don't give me the position that I want, I'm gonna kill you. That's how bad it got. That, like, if people didn't get the positions that they wanted, or they didn't get any position at all, they would just walk up to the president and straight up shoot him, just because they didn't get what they wanted. So, yeah, Garfield, I do think could have been a really good president. I'll give him. Actually, did I see?
Chester Arthur, I don't think was bad. He's another one of those kind.
Let me see. Where did he rank Garfield? Did he not rank him? Oh, yeah, I gave him an incomplete. Yeah, I think I'll do the same, only because he didn't really get a chance. He only was in the office for, like, 3 months. I do think he could have been a good one based off of what he was doing. But again, we'll never know.
Kind of middle of the road people for me. I think he did some good things, like the way that he started moving away from the corruption that was existing in the federal government as far as patronage for jobs and things like that. I'm going to give him a solid C, I think. I'll be right back, guys. Just got to talk to my wife for a second.
So, while he's conversating with his wife, Chester B. Arthur, I'll actually give him a B, and I'll tell you why. Because with him, he was known for being someone who gained who gained his power through the spoils system, through the patronage system. So I should probably elaborate on that a little bit. People that were for the spoils system or whatever were called stalwarts. People that were against it, oh shit, what were they called? I can't think of the name. What was it? Hold on. Oh yeah, half-breeds. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Let me make sure. Yeah, so basically stalwarts were really more about the political machines, about the spoils system, you get your position based off of who you know, and the half-breeds where people are like, no, you need to get your position based off of your merit, based off if you're qualified for the position. Makes sense to us now. Be like, yeah, obviously give the position to the person that's eminent and qualified, but at the time it was really a thing, because from Andrew Jackson onwards, for essentially 60 years up to that point, like, that's pretty much how things were run. Like, whatever political party got office, they gave their positions to the people that supported them the most, and that's basically how it was. But obviously with Guiteau shooting Garfield, kind of hard to justify that type of system, because again, like I said, if someone doesn't get a position that they want, or any position at all, now they go and shoot the president. It's like, is it really worth it to keep that particular system going? But with Chester Arthur, he came from that stalwart system. He came from that political machine system. The funniest part is that he recognized how bad the system had gotten, and because of him, the Pendleton Act was essentially passed, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he supported he enforced it, basically killing he killed civil service office seekers. When I say civil service spoil system, it's one and the same. It's basically just people coming in and demanding that they get this position because they knew someone high up in the party and therefore they deserve it. It's like, no, Arthur killed that. And people will give him too much slack for having like a laissez-faire approach to the presidency. It's like, nah, he was very efficient with his time. He was actually known for being lazy but efficient. And honestly, if you can get away with being lazy and being efficient, that's a dream for a lot of people. I'd rather get my work done in 2 hours as opposed to spending 8 hours to get the same work done. And if I have the ability to do so, then yeah, obviously I'm going to get the work done in 2 hours instead of 8. And Arthur was really good at that. It's just people think that he was just slacking off because, you know, he didn't seem like he was on the job 24/7, which is incredibly stupid, but whatever. But yeah, he passed the Pendleton Act, which essentially killed the whole spoil system thing, or at least made it less and less of a problem. He did rebuild the U.S. Navy. He did see he actually got that imperialist train rolling by building up the Navy, because now we have enough of a Navy to start making demands internationally. Chester A. Arthur. I keep saying B. I'm so sorry, guys. Chester A. Arthur. Now, his immigration policy was kind of crap, especially when it came to the Chinese Exclusion Act, because it was the first time that America just basically said to a group of people, you're not allowed to come into this nation. And again, we're supposed to be the land of the free, but that's the first time that had happened, and that happened under Arthur's administration. So he gets demerits for that. But in the grand scheme of things, he was actually very good as a president, a lot better than what people think. It's just, again, he gets points knocked off for looking lazy when he was very efficient with his time. So he gets a B from me. I'm just gonna...
There you go, lean in. Yeah, you're in.
It
you're in
just
here now.
jumped because I got
Just did
Chester
Arthur right there. So yeah.
Okay.
How did you know that was Chester Arthur, or
I'm gonna
just because
try
you heard
and
me
fast
say it?
forward
I
where
miss his
can,
history.
though.
Hello.
Because I know this
So we're on to Grover Cleveland now.
Should ask my daughter what she
Like-
thinks about
like
these, because
2
at 2
hours.
she knew them all.
And we
Yeah, that's
still
true. She
haven't
did.
gotten to, like,
When our daughter was 2 years old, I did flash. She is one. And all right, back
I
at
love
it.
you.
Mwah. Have fun. Hey, that's your dad's alma mater? Yeah, that's her alma mater as well. That's where my wife. Get to him in just a minute. Aaron, thank you. Tell us something embarrassing about him. He says, "Well, too bad. She has her moments where son." Cleveland is S tier. Cleveland's responsible for giving us the Baby Ruth candy bar because his daughter was Baby Ruth. Dan, thank you. Appreciate that. David, thank you very much. The soda goes invisible. The wife becomes visible. Yes. We call it pop here in Northeast Ohio, but yes. A lot of people saying B.
I never understood that. It's soda, not pop, man. But whatever. I live in Ohio now, so pop it is, I guess.
I'm gonna go C for Grover Cleveland. Good first term, not so much second term. I agree. All right, we're on to Benjamin Harrison. Benjamin Harrison, again, another Ohio guy. Although he was from Indiana when he got elected president, he's buried in Indiana. I think he was governor of Indiana. But it's soda, he says. Benjamin Harrison, I don't think, was a bad president. Cleveland is F. Oh, wait, the president. Harrison, yeah, I think Harrison's going to have to be another C for me. I'm going chronologically, McMaster. Torsk has arrived. What's up, Torsk? So we're up. We're about halfway in now as far as the presidents go. Harrison's, 23? Is he 23? No, he's 24 because McKinley's 25. McKinley, I'm going to give a...
So I know he kind of like went through Grover Cleveland and Harrison pretty quickly. I just want to say with Grover Cleveland, I agree with this ranking. I'll give him a C too. I'm not gonna rank them low because America was pretty conservative at the time, and they wanted a conservative president, and Grover Cleveland was essentially the epitome of fiscal conservatism. He did want like limited government and limited spending when it came to things. I did think about putting him at a D only because of his views on what was it? Sorry, I have to look at my notes again. Like he did have essentially just a whatever view when it came to civil rights and when it came to immigration, and he also had the Dawes Act passed during his administration, which basically is the legacy that we have with Native Americans now, where they essentially live on reservations and small reservations too. Is like there's like one in Oklahoma and then like one in like Montana or Idaho or some crap like that. But basically that's pretty much where Indian people or Native Americans can live and have no interference with the American government, and that's basically what the Dawes Act was, which again complete garbage because they're Native Americans. They're the ones that came here first. This is their territory, and we shunted them aside. So that was trash. Immigration, a lot of stay out of our country. That was on Grover Cleveland. What else? He did modernize the Navy. Like these next few presidents, Arthur. What was it? Shit, what was I thinking? God. Arthur, Cleveland, and Harrison, they were in the process of modernizing the Navy, and Benjamin Harrison did complete that modernization process. Basically set the stage for America to, start enforcing themselves, or start enforcing their demands internationally, at least when it came to, the Caribbean and whatnot. When it came to Hawaii, when it came to the Philippines, that was the start of that. So yeah, I'll put him at a C. I mean, he did some good things, he did some bad things, but yeah, for the most part, it was just whatever. So with Benjamin Harrison, he gets a lot of crap, but I actually do think he was much better than what people give him credit for. There were a lot of things that got passed during his administration. He was another one of those Civil War veterans. He did, and because he did fight with African Americans, he was someone that, was committed to their rights. He wanted them to be able to vote with zero compunction whatsoever. He did pass the McKinley Tariff, which was way too protectionist. Like, it protected American goods internationally, competing against international goods way too much, which was a problem. And this is actually the first time that like the concept of monopolies and how problematic they were with the passage of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which pretty much tried to prevent monopolies from being a thing and try to kill monopolies wherever they needed to be killed. That was Benjamin Harrison. A lot of people seem to think that was Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft. No, that was just Harrison's administration passed that particular bill. However, they didn't really enforce it as much. It's just, like, hey, here's this law, but we're really not going to enforce it per se. But it did get passed, and it was a tool that later politicians could use to destroy monopolies like Standard Oil. I think U.S. Steel was also destroyed. But, that was the first time that, having to deal with monopolies. Because, of course, we were very deep into the Industrial Revolution. And, people were getting rich. People like John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, they were getting very rich. I think at one point Rockefeller was worth more than America itself, like the U.S. Like, he had more money than U.S. government himself. There was a famous political cartoon that shows the reach that... Actually, I could probably find it right now. Let's see, John D. Rockefeller political cartoon. Yeah, that's the one where he's essentially just basically sucking money from everything, and how America is run by the oil industry. He was, his is also another interesting story, but yeah, pretty much monopolies are starting to become a problem, and at least the Sherman Antitrust Act allowed for the government for a way to deal with that particular problem. And he was the first to actually give pension to Civil War veterans. So again, that's another good thing, because obviously he fought in like arguably the greatest war of all time in American history. I think, you know, the vets that fought in that war deserve some sort of pension for their efforts. And I'm sorry I keep looking, because like I said, the Gilded Age, the politicians during that time did not really interest me as much, and it wasn't exactly the most. It wasn't the period between George Washington up until Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't as interesting. So I apologize if I keep looking to the side to, like, you know, expound on what I'm thinking. But yeah, the Gilded Age is just, it sucks. It really does. I don't like it, but you know, it is a part of American history. So here we are. But yeah, again with Harrison, he passed the Silver Purchase Act, which essentially led to the Panic of 1893, because, you know, people were thinking, oh yeah, silver needs to be a part of, you know, the part of the American currency. It needs to have it needs to be involved in American currency. And, you know, essentially what would happen is that creditors would demand payment in gold, and people didn't have gold, so they'd pay in silver, and it just caused the gold shortage, and that's what led to the Panic of 1893, which obviously sucked. But that whole battle between gold versus silver and what should be, you know, the standard of American currency was a battle that continued up until McKinley, who pretty much ensured that America was the gold standard, and pretty much killed silver as any type of force in the currency business. I'm not too knowledgeable about the whole bimetallism issue, so I do recommend, if you are curious about that, to read up on it, but I personally am not the most knowledgeable, so whatever I'm saying, don't quote me on it. It's not, you know, verbatim. Even though I did do some research, I'm still not in a position where I can explain it properly, so I do recommend doing your own research. But in the grand scheme of things, with what Harrison was able to get accomplished, I'll give him a B. And I know that's a little bit higher than what most people have him, but he did manage to get a few things passed that not a lot of people know about that got passed during his administration. I believe that's him. So I'll give him a B, because he did manage to get quite a few things passed. And I think the Sherman Antitrust Act during his administration was probably one of the most important ones, because now you know, monopolies understand that there's a law against them. So
a solid B too. And I might be a little biased there because McKinley's my local guy. I grew up 5 minutes from where McKinley was born. My great uncle built the house he was born in. My wife went to McKinley High School, so I'm a little torn on that one. But I'm probably a little biased in ranking McKinley.
Oh, I'd probably be remiss to mention that particular Silver Act that Harrison passed, Grover Cleveland did repeal. So it pretty much did start to kill silver as, like, you know, any type of currency or any type of standard for American currency. And then Cleveland also did get involved in the Pullman strike. Basically said screw unions and sided with the business interests. But this was the first time that the American government themselves actually got involved in a strike, which never really happened before. But it didn't bode well for the unions themselves, and it's pretty much the start of people's attitude towards union, because there's a lot of people out there that are like, unions aren't the greatest. I don't understand why, but, you know, whatever. And then again, it did reduce the McKinley tariff that Harrison put forth. So again, with Cleveland, not good, not bad either. So, you know, see, I just wanted to elaborate on that. But yeah, I'll
only a little higher than maybe he should be. Who's my favorite president? Probably Lincoln. But McKinley probably more likely as a C, I would guess. He does win the Spanish-American War, gains Hawaii for the United States, the Philippines, things like that. Kanye West, A tier, of course. Which president has been to the most foreign countries? I don't know. That's a good question. All right, we're on to Theodore Roosevelt. Gonna go A. That's gonna.
McKinley, he was probably the first imperialist president that America ever had in terms of like, you know, now that our Navy was built up and modernized with the previous 3 presidents, now McKinley could go forth and, you know, go to countries like Spain and be like, hey, you know, stop doing whatever you're doing in Cuba. And then you fight. America wins that war, grants them a lot of prestige. I think, what else did he do? He kept the nation on the gold standard, like I mentioned before. And the economy, they recovered during his time. So he was fairly popular as a president because of that. But mainly more so for the big business interests, not so much for, you know, regular people. But I will say he really didn't do anything for civil rights. And I think Jim Crow essentially, you know, started taking, like, he wasn't a racist himself, but he didn't do it. Like, there was one particular thing, the Wilmington riots, insurrection, where basically a bunch of white supremacists took over Wilmington, North Carolina, and he did nothing about it. It just let them. They basically just took over the government. Like, it was an actual riot. It wasn't like they got voted out. The black people that were in office at the time, they basically got kicked out. And the white people in that particular city took over, and McKinley did nothing, which it's like, yeah, I mean, I agree with him. I'll put him at a B. That particular incident does put a stain on his legacy, but for the most part, McKinley was, you know, pretty popular, and, you know, he did start to help America assert itself internationally. And of course, with Roosevelt, that was taken to another level, but McKinley was the start of that. And granted, it could have been because of Roosevelt's, you know, influence, but McKinley himself did have that particular type of political bent. And it's unfortunate that he died, because for big business at least, because they loved McKinley. He was never, like, monopolies were still a thing, and McKinley was never going to destroy them. However, his successor, Theodore Roosevelt, was. But with Roosevelt, I'll let him talk about Roosevelt, then I'll give my input on Roosevelt myself. But yeah, McKinley, I agree with him. I'll put him at a B. I think he was good. I don't think he was amazing, but yeah, I definitely would put him at a B for sure. Then of course I'll let him talk about.
Disappoint some people that I know would very much like to put him in that S tier. I am not quite as high on Theodore Roosevelt as a lot of people are, but I'll give him a solid A. And I would definitely put him above Thomas Jefferson. But I would not dispute people who put him in the S tier. S or A, I think, would be appropriate for TR. I think TR did a lot of good things. Really cool dude. Fascinating. One of my favorite presidents, easily. Which is funny because I've got him and Jefferson. Jefferson's one of my least favorite presidents, but I have them both ranked equally. So I think that shows that I've got a little bit of willingness to be objective about this. But
until you get to a specific president that I will not mention now, but this other president was the other reason I wanted to do this video. But yeah, with TR, yeah, I'll put him at A as well. I agree with him. And there are quite a few that I do agree with him with. But TR, he passed the Food and Drug Act. He preserved national parks. He, asserted American. He made the U.S. assert itself internationally. He was pretty much the epitome of an imperialist president. The speak softly and carry a big stick, diplomatic policy. That was him. And he was known for being a trust buster, even though he is more of a trust regulator. He understood that, like, if monopolies kept doing what they were doing, eventually people would riot and, like, not be content with just leaving work, but destroy these monopolies and, essentially end the lives of the people that were in control of these monopolies. and like it would cause a lot of riots, it would cause a lot of unrest, and Roosevelt recognized that. He's like, look, we gotta let some steam out of this teapot, otherwise it's gonna blow up in our faces and cause a lot of damage. So he's more of a trust regulator. He did bust some trust. Yeah, he did destroy a lot of monopolies and trust. Not as much as his successor did, William Taft, but he did do that. He was the start of that. He expanded the Navy, Panama Canal. There's a lot. Square deal, kill monopolies, conserve the resources, consumer protection. Again with the Food and Drug, with the Meat Inspection Act. It was Pure Food and Drugs. Sorry, my mind's starting to slip a little bit. It's been like what 2-3 hours, but yeah, TR's legacy is just it's insane as a president. He was probably our most energetic president, and probably the only president to get shot and still continue a speech. I know Reagan was famous for almost being assassinated, but this man TR got shot and still continued his speech. He got lucky because the bullet hit his speech, his notes on his speech. And TR was like, all right, bet I'm still gonna do the speech. Like, I may be bleeding, but I'm still gonna do the speech. Which, yeah, big balls move, man. Big balls move. But yeah, Theodore Roosevelt, I will give him an A. The only reason I don't put him at S is because he was a little too imperialist, and it did set the stage for America's bully tactics that we still implement to this day. And I hate to say it like that, but yeah, we are bullies. And as you get more and more into like the 60s, 70s, 80s, probably even after the Cold War, that particular tendency of America will start to show itself.
But yeah, I'll go A. For mustache alone. I have some crazy white.
Yeah, that mustache game though was just like amazing.
Teeth. Well, thank you. I don't think they're quite that white, but I won't argue with that. All right, we're on to. William Howard Taft, another Ohio guy, another one of those very meh presidents for me. Yeah. Teddy Roosevelt gives us the Food and Drug Administration, national parks, both solid things, I think. Was he the manliest president? You probably could argue that he was, yeah. Where would you put William Howard Taft? Why is Taft the last president with facial hair? Excellent question.
Yeah, that was something I noticed. That yeah, he's the last one with facial hair, and then after that, I don't think we've had a president that's had any sort of facial hair at all, like at any point. Which, like, come on, man, bring the facial hair back. Like, that issue's amazing.
He ruined Teddy's plans. C. I've been throwing so many in C, I almost hate to do it again. But that's kind of where I'm leaning with Taft. A lot of people saying anywhere from A to D. I'm going to throw Taft in at C. B because of the mustache. How is Zach power hungry, huh? All right. Woodrow Wilson.
Before he starts on Woodrow Wilson, and you've already seen the grade, but before he, so with Taft, he was actually more of a trust buster than TR himself. I think he destroyed 70 trusts and or monopolies, 70 in 4 years, whereas TR killed 40 in 8 years. So Taft is more of like what you would think as a trust busting president than TR was. Taft is really known for pretty much just backing away from a lot of TR's policies, which is why, TR himself is like, look, I can't have this guy destroying my legacy. I gotta run for office. And because he ran for office and he was still very popular, it pretty much split the Republican vote and ensured that Woodrow Wilson got elected into office. And Wilson himself knew it. He's like, yeah, that's pretty much their split, so I'm gonna win. Honestly, Wilson didn't even need to run a campaign. He could have just like showed up and just did the whole Jesus figure thing that he was known for, and he would have won. So, but yeah, with Taft, see, like he did kill a lot of monopolies that needed to, or trusts or whatever that needed to be killed. But I can't rank him higher because he just shit on civil rights again. Didn't really, care too much about black people. So I can't rank him higher. And then his dollar diplomacy is like, let's try to invest in Latin American countries, which is good. But again, it's like you have American involvement in countries that don't want American involvement, and that's kind of the start of, hey, let's stick our foot in, or hey, let's get a finger on this country. Hey, let's get this hand on this country. Hey, let's get this elbow in this country. Hey, let's get this arm. Just continues and continues, and that's, Taft was essentially the start of that particular brand of diplomacy. Yeah, so that I'll give him a C as well. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible either. I really should put him at a D for, not doing much in terms of civil rights, but, All right.
Our third entry into the F category. First of all, we got to remember that Woodrow Wilson's last 2 years as president, he really wasn't president. Mrs. Wilson was. He had a stroke at the end of his second term. And he is the bringer of the income tax to the United States. Just an obscenely racist individual. Born in Virginia. I believe our last president to be born in Virginia to this point.
I wonder why.
Him and Johnson are my least favorite presidents. Wilson, the wannabe peacemaker, the guy, he had a messiah complex.
Yep.
Yeah, just stay out of World War I, Wilson. Okay.
Yeah, Wilson, definite F. No arguments here. He was completely racist. Like, next to Johnson, probably one of the more racist presidents we've ever had. Okay, come on, there you go. Yeah, he, again, besides him being a racist, this man was a proponent of the lost cause mythology. Basically, the whole concept of, oh yeah, the Confederates were fighting for something greater than themselves. The whole, oh yeah, we're fighting for our Southern heritage. That kind of BS that you hear from a lot of people when they try to justify not tearing down statues of known KKK members or known Confederate generals. It's like, oh no, we're protecting our heritage. Wilson was that type of person. He was that proponent that, like, this, what the Confederacy was fighting for was noble and justified, and he was a slavery apologist. All of that stuff. That was Woodrow Wilson in a nutshell. That tells a lot about this man's character when it came to, of course he was never going to do anything with civil rights. I don't expect him to. This man even had the unmitigated gall to screen A Birth of a Nation, by far the most racist movie that's ever come out in American history. He screened it in the White House, and then when they watched the movie, and then the whole backlash of, why are you showing this racist movie in the White House? Wilson's like, oh yeah, no, I didn't know about how racist this movie was going to be. No, you're the president of the United States, and, this director, I forgot, Griffith or whatever his name is, he was a good friend of yours from what I remember. So you can't be like, oh, I didn't know what this movie is going to be. Like, I'm sure you talked to the man before. So you're telling me you're just going to have some rando dude be like, hey, I want to screen this movie in your house. All right, cool. Just you're not gonna ask, you're not gonna inquire, nothing. Be like, hey, what's this movie about? No, don't give me that crap. You knew what this movie was about. You loved it. You wanted it. You wanted that justification of the lost cause mythology. You wanted to be like, oh yeah, see, the Confederacy, they were fighting for a noble cause. They didn't want black people to take over and do, black people stuff, which apparently was acting like monkeys in the movie, which, yeah, it's just complete trash human being. Just unbelievably bad. Also, like he said, a bit of a Jesus figure, a messiah complex. thought that he was the great peacemaker, when essentially he pretty much, set the stage for all these right-wing, governments starting to take place, with Germany with Hitler, Italy with Mussolini, because no one was really happy with the hand that they were dealt, and with the Treaty of Versailles, especially Germany, because I also enjoy reading up on Nazi history. Not to say that I advocate for Adolf Hitler or anything like that, not at all. But that is a particular topic that interests me, and that nobody, as a German, it pretty much felt like countries were smacking you in the butt with that particular treaty, and Wilson helped to get that treaty passed. So yeah, good job there, Woodrow. Brilliant. Now he did, develop have the Federal Reserve passed in his, during his term. So the modern day, centralized banking system that we have, that's due to him. Women's rights, did become a thing, did become official in his administration. So again, that was also a thing. And he did bring in the first income tax, even though it was technically Lincoln, which I forgot to mention. Lincoln was actually the one that brought in the first income tax. I think it was like a 2% tax during Lincoln's time. But with Wilson, it was, I don't know the exact figure, but I do know that it was the first modern day income tax, how we look at income tax today. So he did do some good things, but his racism and the fact that he failed miserably with the League of Nations, and I'm not even going to give him a pass for getting a stroke with how racist he was. Yeah, he deserves to have that stroke. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say things like that, but nah, he gets no sympathy from me. Definite F. No argument with me here. I just wanted to explain why he deserves that F thoroughly. I'm not going to miss an opportunity to crap on Woodrow Wilson. So, yeah.
Okay, Warren Harding, our last Ohio president, and I'm convinced the reason we haven't had an Ohio president since is because Warren Harding was so bad. I would not put him at F, but I will put him at D. Which, it's painful to me that we've got two Ohio presidents in the D category, but that's just kind of the way it is. Warren Harding, and my mother-in-law went to Warren Harding High School in Warren, Ohio. Edith Wilson was a better president. Yeah, I'll put Warren Harding at D. Some big scandals in his presidency. Teapot Dome, absolutely. I wouldn't argue with people who put him at F. But yeah, I'll give him a low D for Harding. All right, we're on to Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah, Harding, I'll give him a D as well. Mainly because he wasn't exactly known for being hands-on with things. And it was scandal-ridden. And again, Teapot Dome. I think there was another one. Oh yeah, the Veterans Bureau. They had an issue with that too, about veterans not getting their pensions. I know he did hire good people, fortunately for him. I think Hoover was his Secretary of Commerce, which helped him out. And then Mellon as Treasury Secretary, where his tax cuts essentially helped to goose the economy to where the Roaring Twenties became a thing. So the people that he hired were very good. Some of the people, it was a mixed bag. He hired very good people, and then he hired very corrupt people. There was no in between. There wasn't someone that was just okay at his job or her job. It was just, you're either very good or very bad. And I'm all right. And he did put business above labor, that continuing that trend of business over labor. He did expand and improve upon the federal highway system, but this is the precursor to the interstate system that we have today, that Eisenhower put into place. And he was the first to restrict immigration in certain areas. Now, there was a Chinese Exclusion Act during, was it during Arthur's time, or what did I say before, where Chinese people were flat out excluded, you cannot come. But this is a restriction, and this is the first time America made it a point to restrict immigrants from certain countries and allow immigrants from other countries. Obviously, you could, with Europeans, they wanted Europeans coming into the country, but they didn't want specific groups of people, Asian they didn't want Asian countries to have their people come over, Latin American people, the usual. So it's actually pretty modern in terms of like the immigration policy that we kind of have today, but that's pretty much Harding got that started. So yeah.
Coolidge.
Oh yeah, where he has I'll put him at a D too. He wasn't great. Not the best that we've had. Although he could have been good if he didn't hire any if his administration wasn't scandal ridden, I'd probably give him a C, maybe even a B, because the good people that he did hire were exceptional at their positions. So, but can't get over those scandals, and you can't keep trusting people that don't have your best interest. So.
Calvin Coolidge is an interesting one, and I'll be curious to see where you guys would put Calvin Coolidge. I'm kind of, and Luke Davies. I'm not showing your chat isn't showing up because of the language, but he did. Woodrow Wilson did screen Birth of a Nation at the White House, which is about the Klan. Cool Bones, thank you. I am not going to include recent presidents. I'm going to stop with George H.W. Bush. I don't think we can objectively judge recent presidents anyway, plus I want to avoid the argument with that. We're over 1,500 people now watching. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you subscribe and like if you haven't already. Check out some of the links in the description. I have a gaming channel. It's called History Guy Gaming. Daily content on there as well as on here. I'm torn. A- to B+ on Coolidge. But I'm going to go ahead and give Coolidge a solid B, I think. I would not argue with someone who put him at A. Silent Cal was, I think, a very underestimated president. He comes in the middle of Harding's term, and I think does a really good job, and does a good job with his second term as well. You love Crusader Kings? Yeah. A lot of fun.
Hey, Crusader Kings 3. Definitely, if people are into strategy games, definitely a game I recommend playing. I'm actually playing right now, and I think at some point I will make a video starting a brand new campaign with Crusader Kings 3. So, I'll announce it or something. So anyone that's watching this, definitely be on the lookout for that.
Fun with that one. All right, so Herbert Hoover. Obviously, the stock market.
With Calvin Coolidge, I mean, he's great. He's known for just staying out the way, and then the 20s be the 20s, the roaring 20s be a thing. I'd put him at a C. He wasn't exceptional. He's just known for being silent and having a dry sense of humor. But the smartest thing he did was just stay out the way and not do anything of note. I don't rank him as highly as this guy does, but I put him at a C. There was nothing exceptional that he did. I was like, oh my god, that's definitely a legacy booster. Hell, even looking at my notes, I'm like, it's not much. I'm even looking right now. I'm not even focused on the camera. I'm looking, and I'm like, yeah, there isn't really much that he did. He didn't really interfere with the Great Mississippi Flood, because obviously he still had the archaic notion that government should not get involved in helping its own people, which is the dumbest thing. To us, it seems like, yeah, why won't the government, get involved and help their people? But at the time, the prevailing thought was government should not interfere in, the problems of the states, or just in general. They should not be, trying to help people. So, yeah, I put him at a C. Just average. He just stayed out the way. Just let 20s be the 20s.
Crash happens during his presidency, but honestly, I don't think Hoover was as bad as some people think. He was a very intelligent guy. Had been Secretary of Commerce before he was president. I might rank him a little higher than other people. I'm kind of torn between C and D, but I'm going to put Hoover in as a C. D+, C-, if we had such a thing, is probably where I'd throw him. Only president born on July 4th. And we did have three presidents, I think, who died on July 4th. Two of them on the same July 4th. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson died on July 4th, 1826. He tried, but he failed. He tried, yeah.
I mean, they try, but yeah. So with Hoover, honestly, I'll agree with him. He was really a victim of his times, but the crash happening and having to deal with the Great Depression. I don't know if any president would have been able to handle the beginning aspects of that Great Depression. Even someone like Abraham Lincoln or FDR in this case, which is funny because if FDR had been elected first and then Hoover came afterwards, people would have been like, oh yeah, this Hoover guy, he knows about, getting things done. He's not a politician. He's someone that's like, gets things done. He doesn't try to whisper sweet nothings or whatever into your ear. So it's funny because like if they had been flip flop, maybe people would have been looking at Hoover as one of the greats and FDR as C or D tier, but it didn't happen that way. And Hoover was known for being stubborn, and he didn't really end prohibition. He kept it continuing, even though it was a terrible law or amendment that should have never been ratified. Americans drink beer or drink alcohol. That's just the way of life, and to try and limit yourself from doing such things. I'm not saying I'm not like trying to be philosophical about this. It's just that's just alcohol is a ubiquitous part of an American's life. Not all Americans, but for the most part, most Americans. But the fact that he kept prohibition continuing, even though it was proven that prohibition was not effective at all in preventing people from drinking. In fact, crime was rising because you had organized gang warfare with Al Capone and the mafia bosses in New York, and then the West Coast as well. So it's like you obviously have this system that's not working, but you're going to continue prohibition. Why? I mean, the revenue generated from alcohol probably could have helped a little bit. Of course, people wouldn't have been able to afford alcohol with unemployment rising, but still, any revenue would have helped. But yeah, his policies during the Great Depression they were terrible. But again, I don't know if many people would have been able to drag America out of the beginning stages of that Great Depression. Not even like a Lincoln or Washington. But yeah, he is really more a victim of the circumstances. And then also the issue with the bonus army, just the vets were coming like demanding their pension because they were promised a pension at a specific time. The date eludes me, but they were promised that specific pension, and they wanted it now, obviously, to help them through this depression. Because again, at this point, welfare wasn't a thing. There was no Social Security or anything that comes in FDR's term, but Hoover essentially allowed MacArthur to get rid of him by force, and that particular incident made Hoover very unpopular and essentially ensured that FDR got elected by a crushing landslide. There was no chance Hoover was getting reelected, especially after that. So yeah, Hoover, I'd put him at a D. Now I will say with his legacy before he became president, definitely A tier. He was one of the greatest cabinet members of all time. With what he did as Secretary of Commerce, getting food. I think he was like a food administrator or something. Being able to feed people, like he was great at that. But as a president, he failed miserably. But again, I'm not gonna give him an F because I think he was more a victim of circumstance than how bad his policies were. And like I said, who's to say that he wouldn't have been the A tier one and FDR would have been the D tier one if they had been elected in different times? But yeah,
that's fair. Will I react to more Sabaton songs? Absolutely. I'm gonna be doing the Royal Guard here pretty soon. I have merch, Obedient Moss. There's merch on the channel. I want to design some new merch, some specific stuff for vlogging through history. Right now, just kind of some generic stuff that I've done. But I don't know about Lincoln nearly fighting a duel with broadswords. That's the first time hearing about that. That doesn't mean it's not true. S tier, vlogging through history, Mr. Terry. Thank you. All right. Franklin Roosevelt. All right. Woo, this is going to be a tough one because I know a lot of people would love to put him in the S tier. I am not so inclined. Is my family from Glasgow, Scotland? Yeah, kinda. Part of my family is. My great-great-great-grandfather owned a pub in Glasgow called the Old Toll that is still there today. They've actually filmed some scenes for Peaky Blinders there. They were originally from the West Midlands in England, but they lived in Glasgow for 20 years before they came to America. I do not believe Franklin Roosevelt responsible for getting us out of the Depression. World War II did that.
Yeah, completely agree with him there. A lot of people have this misconception that his New Deal helped us get out of the Depression. It didn't. It was World War II. And that kind of posed a problem because now America runs on war economy on a permanent basis. Because they basically see, hey, you're in war, you get all this money, you get the economy is like constantly goosed. That particular discussion, I would have to do more research because I'm not an economist. But I can definitely say that America does. It's funny that after World War II, we've been in war essentially every decade since. Like, there hasn't been a decade where we haven't been at war or we haven't been fighting anything. But again, that's a discussion for another day.
That said, I think Roosevelt, his leadership during World War II was outstanding. And that's probably one of the most difficult crises we've ever faced as president. Anybody's ever faced as president. I'm going to give him an A because I'm not a huge fan of some of the New Deal stuff. And Oscar McIntyre, thank you. I appreciate that. Not a huge fan of some of the New Deal stuff. I think some of it was good, like the Public Works Administration and the things where they gave people jobs and things like that. Some of the entitlement programs, I don't know.
He so badly wants to say Social Security. I can feel it. Any type of and I can tell. I've already watched the video, so I already know his political leanings anyway, and he even elaborates on it near the end. But for anyone that's watching, you can tell that he's right leaning. So the fact that he doesn't like some of the New Deal aspects, like Social Security, even though he doesn't blatantly say it, it's like, yeah, you may not like it. It may not be the most popular thing, but it is needed. It is definitely needed. I mean, we do need a blanket behind people or underneath people that cannot provide for themselves. Welfare is something that's needed, and it is a thing in every country, and it took America a while to get to that point. But yeah, with FDR, amazing wartime president, arguably one of the best next to Lincoln, although Lincoln was more hands-on than FDR was. FDR just happened to put really good people in charge from the jump. He was fortunate in that aspect. It took Lincoln forever to find someone that was qualified enough to run his army the way he wanted it run. Obviously with McClellan, just a trash human being, but whatever. But yeah, FDR, amazing war president. Now I will dock him points for trying to goose the Supreme Court, because it was at 9 people, but it was a pretty conservative Supreme Court, and there were a lot of older people in the court. And FDR is essentially like, all right, for anyone that's like over this particular age, I get to put in one new member. So it was like I think it was like 70 or whatever, 60 or 70, and there are like 6 Supreme Court justices that are over that age limit. So obviously 9 plus 6 is 15. So it would have had 15 people to offset the conservatism that was occurring in the Supreme Court. Obviously, people excoriated him for it because you're trying to change a branch of the American government to suit your needs, and that's beyond your prerogative as an executive branch, as a person of another branch. So yeah, that he gets docked for that, and it actually almost resulted in him not being elected in I shouldn't say not being elected, but it did hurt him quite a bit in the 1940 election. Yeah, his second term wasn't as popular as the first one. His radio site chats, he was a really good communicator. And he did give Americans hope. So that is important. If you have hope as a nation, it's easier for you to get through the tough times. And FDR was great at that, providing hope. And so yeah, I'd agree. I'd put FDR at an A. I'm not gonna try to go too much. And honestly, I've ran over it was like almost 3 hours. I said it was gonna be 2, but yeah, this is such an interesting topic for me. It's definitely a topic that I like talking about. So I apologize if it's been running this long, and for those that are actually watching this to this period, thank you. But yeah, FDR, I would definitely rank him at an A tier, not quite S. And I will. Yeah, I will dock him points for trying to change the judicial system. Also, this is probably the first time that Keynesian economics is a thing where like you spend to get into a deficit and government takes more of a direct involvement in helping people, but you spend to get into a deficit. And mind you, again, I'm not an economics major. So anyone that is more knowledgeable about this can explain better than I can. I just know the basics. But basically, we spend beyond, we run up a debt, we have a deficit, basically to run programs that aid Americans. And the funniest part is we've pretty much been on that particular system, whether the president's been Democrat or Republican, since FDR. Even though Republicans love saying, "Oh yeah, no, we're not going to spend as much. We're all about, small government." And it's just with some Republican presidents, they spend way more than a lot of these Democratic presidents that have been accused of spending, obscene amounts of money. But mind you, it's whoever's in power. So yeah, FDR.
So I'm hedging him back from S tier because of some of that. But as leader, and the Japanese internment camps obviously not.
Yeah, that's another demerit. The only reason he's not in the S, the main reason he's not in the S tier, completely forgot to mention that the Japanese internment camps, because you can't do that. You can't subjugate a group of people because you think that they may go against you because they're from a country that you're currently fighting. No, a lot of these Japanese Americans immigrated earlier, and they were already acclimated to American society. But because they looked a certain way, you're like, oh no, they're a threat to our nation. And you basically pulled Adolf Hitler and put them in concentration camps, even though you didn't work them to death. You did intern them. You did keep them in one place. Sounds kind of familiar. But you did do that. And obviously that's a stain on your legacy. So the Supreme Court and the Japanese internment camps are really the main things that prevent FDR from reaching true greatness like Lincoln and Washington did. So yeah.
Not a good thing at all. The fireside chats were a great thing. Overcoming a handicap as he did, I think, is outstanding. But I'll give him an A because based completely on his leadership for World War II. That, in and of itself, for me, gives him an A. Okay. Harry Truman. Another tough one, I think, for me. Yeah, and Gallo, I would agree. His intentions were good. Franklin Roosevelt. Truman. Interesting. Have I ever been to Europe? No, but I'm hoping that this summer that's going to change. And it looks like it might. That travel may be allowed from the U.S. To Europe. I haven't gotten a COVID vaccine. I'm a relatively healthy 43-year-old man that I believe I've already had COVID. I think I got it pretty early on when I was in Boston when it broke out there.
Man, just get the damn vaccine, dude. Okay.
But that said, if I have to get the vaccine to be able to travel, I'm willing to do that. I don't know if everybody in my family is, but I'm going to give Truman a solid B. Kind of an A-, B+ kind of thing for me. Smith, thank you. Appreciate that. But yeah, I'll go with B for Truman. I think solid. Tough to follow. World War II. Kind of comes in at the end of World War II. Imagine that job. Imagine coming in right as we're about to achieve victory over Germany and time to find out about the bomb and having to make a decision about that. Franco, thank you, appreciate that. I will definitely be doing some more Latin American history. I'm excited to learn more about that. Some Philippine history, yeah, at some point we will definitely get to some things. That pick is F tier. Paul Jimenez, thank you very much. You're from Barcelona, very cool. All right, Eisenhower.
Truman, I will give Truman an A. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, what? Well, people that would watch the show or watch this particular stream. If I had subscribers, please subscribe. But yeah, Truman, I would give an A. And the reason being is, as a humanitarian president, he was probably one of the best. The Berlin airlift, supplying food to the people of West Berlin when Stalin tried to cordon off Berlin from the rest of Germany. He also, the Marshall Plan also happened during his tenure, which again helped to rebuild Europe. In terms of helping people and not, expecting something in return, Truman was one of the best. That alone should put him at the top of the top. But again, he didn't really try to prevent communism in China. He kind of just let that he let that boat sail, which obviously causes us problems to this day. And he dropped the atomic bombs, which kind of opened up Pandora's box, because now we have insane killing capability with one snap of the finger. We can kill 150, 200,000 people by dropping one singular bomb. The funniest part about all this, America is the only country to drop a bomb in times of war, and now because they did that, they don't allow anyone else to build up their nuclear power, or at least in the Middle East, but that's another story, which is hypocritical as hell, but whatever. But yeah, because you dropped that atomic bomb now, and the Soviet Union did develop atomic bombs for themselves, now you have Pandora's box that is essentially open, because now you can't just willy-nilly drop bombs, because the other country can also do the same, and that can cause destruction of our planet. And obviously that's not something that anybody wants. So you could have invaded Japan, it may have cost lives for sure, but I think dropping the atomic bomb is, you opened Pandora's box with that. And I'm not saying it would have cost lives like it's meaningless. No, of course not. But that concept of, oh my god, they can kill us, so many of us, at just with one bomb, it eventually may have been a thing, but it did dictate foreign policy for a long period of time when those atomic bombs dropped, and that's a problem, or that was a problem. He did get us involved in the Korean War, which again, with a lot of these wars that dealt with communism, they were not very popular. Korean War, Vietnam War, all of that, it wasn't a good idea. It sounded good initially, but in the end, it killed the popularity of the presidents that were mainly involved in those wars, with Harry Truman in the Korean War, and with LBJ in the Vietnam War. But yeah, he did. NATO was a thing that happened during his time. Of course, the creation of Israel, which pretty much opened up a hornet's nest in the Middle East, or you pretty much just dropped a hornet's nest in the Middle East by creating a Jewish state in the middle of all these Islamic countries, which I understand the humanitarianism behind it. I understand why they wanted to do something like that, but you just caused a whole lot of problems that people still or countries still deal with today, with America being one of them. That's not to say that it shouldn't have been done. I do think there could have been a better way to do it. I don't know. I don't think I'm qualified enough to speak on that, to say, oh yeah, we could have put it here in this country or another country, but creating Israel from Palestine was not something we should have done, period. But it's hard to say. But I will say the last thing about Truman is that he did get the ball rolling on civil rights, with, desegregating the military. That did happen during Truman's administration, and Truman personally got involved in making sure that that was an occurrence. So, merits to him. Like, his positives far outweigh the negatives. That's why I put him at A. Yes, he allowed communism to fester in China and didn't really do much to. He got involved in the Korean War, which is pretty unpopular, and we didn't really win anyway. So it's just a waste of resources. Yes, those are all bad, and again, the creation of Israel in the Middle East, not the greatest idea. But his humanitarianism, his personality, his strength of personality, his stance on civil rights, his oh no, sorry, I forgot my train of thought. Marshall Plan and that Berlin airlift definitely help countries recover. So yeah, I'll give him an A. I think he was a really good president, and he probably should have been reelected, but I don't think he ran, or I think he knew he wasn't going to get nominated, so I forget, but he should have had more than one term, for sure. He just, people were tired of the Korean War and all that, so yeah.
Solid A. I think Eisenhower was a good president. I think he did some really good things. The interstate highway system's fantastic. His warnings and his farewell address about the military-industrial complex were solid things. Good leader. Did some good things in dealing with communism, the Marshall Plan, the aftermath of the Marshall Plan, kind of coming in after Korea. Not a perfect president, but I think a good A.
Yeah, I'll give Eisenhower an A. Just looking at a lot of things that he did, researching it. Yeah, he may not appeal to everyone, especially people of a more leftist, liberal bent. But he did. The interstate highway system, of course, is what we use to this day to travel on the road. That happened during his presidency. He ended our involvement in the Korean War. Good. He did not kill any of the New Deal programs when he could have, but he did not because he understood the importance of welfare. Thank you for that. What else did he do? He initiated the space race, so another thing that was a positive because he funded more money into science, so that's good. So yeah, all in all, he was a pretty good president. I put him at A, for sure. I wouldn't put him like S tier or anything because I think that's reserved for like the best of the best. Like people, obviously Washington being the father of our nation and Abraham Lincoln, basically keeping us together through the Civil War. Yeah, Eisenhower I'd give an A. There's not much, and he also pushed for civil rights as well. As a Republican, or I shouldn't say as a Republican because they were known for that at the period of time, but yeah, he did push for greater civil rights, so that's definitely a thing.
Expanded, excellent point, Mikalami. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think he was a good president when it came.
Let's talk Cash App.
Oh man,
Want to savor every swipe of a free custom
into civil rights. Comes in the 50s when we're dealing with stuff in the South kind of coming to a head, and I think handled that fairly well. Alucard, thank you. Akron, awesome, very cool, just 40 minutes down the road from me, just right down I-76 from here. Have I ever been to Ireland? No, but I very much hope to. Even though it hurts you as a socialist, Titus, well, I thank you for that. Kennedy. I think Kennedy is one of those people that it's tough to judge because I think he gets judged at least partially because of the fact he got assassinated. I think he was a solid leader. I think his leadership during the Cuban Missile Crisis was very, very good. Adam, thank you. Another Northeast Ohioan. Very cool. Appreciate that. We're over 1,600 people now. Kennedy, I don't want to rank him high just because everybody else does. I think I'm going to put him B. Like I said, I think his leadership, the way he maneuvered and handled the Cuban Missile Crisis was good. Some other stuff that he handled, not so good. But yeah, it's kind of an incomplete, and I think a lot of times when people die prematurely, we judge them higher than we ought to based on that. But, well, you know, Emil, if we're going to talk about womanizers, you're going to be dealing with half the people on this list.
That is for damn sure. That is, yeah. Can't agree with him there.
Thomas Jefferson, you know, has children with a slave. Warren Harding, big-time womanizer. Franklin Roosevelt was a womanizer. Obviously, Kennedy and Clinton, and you know, a lot of these people. We're not judging based on character. If we did, this list would look different for me. You'd have Grant at the top. You'd have Andrew.
Well, I mean, you can include a character as, you know, a way to evaluate, but yeah, obviously you can't make character like the main thing. Like, you still have to take their legacies into account. I think the best way to do it is to have a mixture of both character and legacy, because again, with a lot of these politicians, you know, their character influences how they're going to run their administration. So it's very hard to take character out. So, but yeah, I will not rank politicians strictly on character, because like you said, if it was strictly on character, then yeah, Grant would be top, of course, or one of the top. Someone like Jimmy Carter, who was not the greatest president, but, you know, amazing human being, he'd be at the top too. But since we're not ranking it strictly on character, we're also ranking it on legacies. You know, we have to take an objective look. We have to look at everything. We can't just look at one aspect or the other. Like, you can't just exclude character, but you also can't make it like the main thing. So,
Andrew Jackson at the bottom, you know, things like that. We're not just judging on character. LBJ.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I should probably... yeah, my bad. It is getting kind of late, so I'm going to try and be quicker about this. But Kennedy, I would put it as a B as well. I think he was overrated, honestly. And it's not like a harsh overratedness. I think he was more of like a symbol of hope, more so than anything. Kind of like how modern day Democrats view a Bernie Sanders, like a symbol of hope. But in terms of actually, you know, his legacy, it's a mixed bag. I mean, you have the Bay of Pigs, which is terrible, but then you also have, you know, increasing or the space race at the peak of its popularity during his time. The Cuban Missile Crisis, which, yes, that was handled, you know, I wouldn't say the best, but he got through it, so that's a plus. But he also got the ball rolling on Vietnam, and I know LBJ gets a lot of flack for continuing and even pushing for more involvement in Vietnam. But it was Kennedy that got that ball rolling. Like, it was Kennedy who started. He's the one that was fascinated with Vietnam, and LBJ just continued that policy. I don't know if it was because he wanted to do it for Kennedy or if he truly believed for himself it was the best thing to do. But Kennedy was the one that, you know, got that ball rolling. So that's you know, a point that I have to dock for him. And he did create the Peace Corps, Kennedy. That was, you know, that was him. But another thing that is an issue is also he founded the U.S. Israeli military alliance, which I think is still ongoing to this day. Pretty much the reason why Israel can even, you know, compete with all these Middle East, or not just compete, but even beat them in wars, is because we supply them with all these weapons. We give them all this military aid so that they can survive. And that's really the reason why all these Middle Eastern countries hate us, because this country that should not be here in the first place is being supported by this country that we hate, that's involved in all of our politics and will not leave when they get their foot in a country. It's just, yeah, I can't even, I don't even know what to say about the whole, our policy in the Middle East, but it's just complete the only thing I can say is just complete garbage. But yeah, I mean, Kennedy got that ball rolling with U.S. and Israel aligning themselves militarily. So I put him at a B. I think he was remembered more so for his assassination and that he died young and that he was a symbol of hope than for what he actually did. And what he actually did, it's model of inconsistency. Just I shouldn't say inconsistency, more so just, yeah, he did good, then he did bad. It's like taking one step forward and then one step back, and just repeating the process. So I put him at a B. I don't rank Kennedy as highly as like a lot of Democrats probably would. So
Being ein Berliner, yes. Thoughts on the Warren Commission? I'm indifferent about that. I think, as with everything, it was probably at least partially political. We are in Vietnam, baby. Yes, we are. React to Adam Ruins History. I'll have to check that out. Lee Harvey Oswald not on here. I don't see Lee Harvey Oswald. I think Johnson was decent. I'm gonna throw him in C because I think the good and the bad kind of offset each other with Johnson. Steve, I can't argue with that. JFK's handling of Cuban Missile Crisis, he was dealing with some really polarizing factions. Some who just wanted nuclear war and some who wanted to capitulate completely.
Oh, an interesting story about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Russia was this close to launching their nuclear. And when I say this close, like literally this close. Oh, yeah, sorry. This close to initiating nuclear warfare with us. There were 3 Russian officers on a submarine that had the codes to launch the nuclear warheads towards America. 2 of the 3 hit the button. The third one refused to do it. And because of that decision, we were all spared, nuclear warfare and inevitable destruction. So, thank Jesus. Or, I know I'm Muslim, but still, thank you.
I didn't even catch the chat's going so fast. F4ZE1, thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, we've got just a couple more because we're not going to get into the modern ones. Nixon's enough.
So LBJ, this is where we differ quite a bit. I would put LBJ at an A. Mainly his work on civil rights. He was finally the person that managed to convince white America to accept civil rights. And he basically used their own tactics, the whole Judeo-Christian tactics of how can we be a nation of freedom and all this if we continuously subjugate a people, for hundreds of years, and like to use biblical, terminology to essentially put white America in a moral straitjacket, and eventually help to get the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed, basically ensuring that there could be no discrimination whatsoever on the basis of race. Of course, further civil rights acts were introduced later on during his presidential administration, but that 1964 one is obviously what he's known for. Not only that, he was also big on ending poverty, because he did grow up poor. So that's something I can respect. The president that actually wanted to end poverty, and not a lot of presidents would make that their agenda. It's funny because when he did, pass the Civil Rights Act, and he was essentially a Democrat, a Southern Democrat who passed the Civil Rights Act, it flip-flopped the political landscape to what it is today, to where, it's Democrats that, get the cities, the West Coast, all of those like urban areas, and the South now gets, the Republicans now get the South, the Midwest, the rural areas. That's what happened during LBJ's term. So that political landscape of what it is today, that's due to his administration and his decision to push to get the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. But yeah, Medicare and Medicaid, that was passed during his time. I know it's very polarizing, very contentious, but it is needed. We do need to provide some form of health care, that's not going to break someone's wallet. They should not. And again, my views on healthcare, that's a story for another day, but basically I don't feel like we need to fear getting injured, because if we get injured we may have to pay an exorbitant amount just to get treated. At least with Medicare and Medicaid, we have a chance of getting treated or getting the health care that we need without us going into bankruptcy. So that was important, and I know people may not necessarily agree with it, but we have to take a step before we can eventually find something that works for everybody. He bolstered his space program, and he was actually the first to deal with gun control, because obviously as a man of the South, you can tell guns are a big issue. And then of course with the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, yeah, I think we need to have some form of gun control, is pretty much what he was telling himself. And yeah, he was the first to deal with that. Of course, he's also the president that allowed for federally insured student loans. So the reason why people like myself who can continue their education and who have continued their education and gotten their masters is because of LBJ's policy of allowing, federally insured student loans. So we can get, that loan, that unsubsidized loan to, help fund our education. LBJ. So personally, I've benefited from this man's, policies, which is why, I would rank him higher than most people would. Now he does get docked. He does get docked mainly for Vietnam, and rightfully so, because that's a war we should have never been involved in the first place. But of course, with the whole communism thing, the problem is if we didn't get involved, people would have looked at him like, "Oh yeah, you're a weak president. See, you're letting communism expand." So he's caught in a rock and a hard place. And that's pretty much what presidents after World War II had to deal with, from Truman onwards, up until the dissolution of the Soviet Union in '91, I believe. That they had to deal with. That, oh yeah, we can't let Russia spread communism, but if you don't stop it, then you're weak. But then you try to stop it, and now you're in an unpopular war. If you're the same politicians that wanted you to stop. Or I wanted you to stop the spread of communism. Now they're criticizing you for your, how you're running the war, which is like, you wanted me in this war in the first place. Because I'm pretty sure a lot of these presidents probably would have never wanted, to be involved in these wars if it was up to them personally. But gotta stop the spread of communism. So you got to get involved in this war, and he gets hammered for increasing involvement in Vietnam, but. At the same time, if he didn't increase involvement, people would have been like, "See, look at him. He's so weak that he's not, he's not trying to stem the tide of communism. He's such a weak president. We need a stronger president, someone who's harder on communism." So I don't dock him as much as most people would. That's why I put him at an A. Really the main thing that he messed up on was Vietnam, and even then, with all his war on poverty, Medicare and Medicaid, Civil Rights Act, gun control, federally insured student loans, all of these things, I gotta put the man in the A tier. Like I have to give the full story. And yes, Vietnam sucked, but of course, if that's really the main negative aspect of his presidency, then I think he did pretty well for himself. So yeah, I put him at an A. That's probably where we defer. I can't put LBJ at C. Especially since I've benefited personally from, his policy by being able to get federal loans to go through, and get my master's in public health and epidemiology. So
another really interesting one. Oh, Lee Harvey Oswald. There you are. I see. Okay. Yeah. See, I think Johnson did some good things, but some bad things, and I think they kind of offset each other.
Not really. I mean, yeah, Vietnam sucked, but again, like listed like 5 or 6 things that he did that people still benefit to this day. His legacy is a lot more far-reaching than a lot of people think. And maybe Kennedy would have been the one to enact, some of these policies, but it's LBJ that actually did it. So we got to give the man credit for, what he's done.
Okay, so Nixon's another really tough one, because I think he did some really solid things as president, but you can't ignore the corruption that goes on as well. So, boy, this is a tough one. And I know we've got a lot of them, but honestly, yeah, it is looking like a bell curve, and I think that's probably how it should be, right? I'm probably gonna go C for Nixon. Foreign policy, pretty good. Domestic policy, not so good. And I think it offsets, again, kind of like with Nixon. Or kind of like with Johnson. Gerald Ford.
Yeah, so with Nixon, again, like he said, you kind of have to view him in two perspectives. Up until Watergate, yeah, Nixon was really good, especially when it came to his foreign policy, especially with his detente his improving his relations with China, and then his detente with the Soviet Union. And then, he, again, with just the ability to deal with international, just to deal with other nations internationally. He was really good at making America look really good internationally. The Environmental Protection Agency, that was a thing during Nixon's time. He ended U.S. involvement during the Vietnam War, which obviously resulted in him crushing his opponent. He beat the brakes off of. And if people want to see how popular Nixon was before Watergate, presidential race. Was it 1972? Where? Oh, I don't know. I thought they were gonna pull up a map, but this man won 520 electoral votes as opposed to 17 for George McGovern. 520. This man won, and again, my math may be off here, but 90% of the electoral votes. And he won 60.7% of the popular vote. This man was insanely popular, and mainly for his foreign policy. But even some of the domestic stuff that he did was pretty good. Also, SALT won, and the anti-ballistic missile treaty, I believe. Yeah, which was the first time that arsenals were limited. That happened during Nixon's presidency. Again, that was part of the detente with the Soviet Union. But he did reduce funding for NASA, which kind of sucked. But at that point, the space race wasn't as much of a policy, considering America was being the brakes off of the Soviet Union. And we achieved our goal with Apollo 11, having the first man land on the moon. After that, to a lot of Americans, what else was there? Before Watergate, Nixon probably would have been A tier. And again, the results themselves, like the will of the people, man won 60% of the popular vote and 90% of the electoral vote. I mean, you tell me. And yes, again, with Watergate, with how bad it was, pretty much Watergate essentially makes, if it was just strictly Watergate, obviously be an F. So yeah, I'd give Nixon a C, because of how detrimental Watergate was. And the problem with Watergate is because for the first time, I shouldn't say for the first time, but it started that train of people not being able to trust the government anymore. You can't really trust what the government is telling you. And that with Nixon, that's really where, the modern day concept of not trusting the government, it started with Nixon. So that's kind of the longest lasting legacy of Nixon, which is really bad, which honestly I really should put him at a D. But I think with a lot of the stuff they did, with his foreign policy and some of the stuff they did domestically, it's I can't go to that extent. So I'd give him a C as well.
I don't know. I'm gonna go D. This is tough for me. I just, Ford didn't do a lot.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, and I'm trying to speed this up now. Ford, he didn't really do a lot. He didn't really, well, I'll let him explain.
Either way, honestly. And he's from Michigan, so that drops him down a little bit, you know what I mean? But I think I'm just going to go D for Gerald Ford. Sam Rosenberg, thank you. Unlike Grant, Nixon's corruption was personally directed. You're absolutely right about that. There is a difference for sure. Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, I give Ford a D. And yeah, the pardon with Nixon was, nudge, nudge, wink, wink type of deal. But yeah, it's just for the most part, he didn't really do anything remarkable. Yeah, the Helsinki Accords, they did happen during his term, which basically, thawed the Cold War a little bit more. You did have, he did do well for handicapped children to ensure that they get the same level of education that, children that weren't handicapped. He also, again, he pardoned Nixon, which, yeah, I put him at a D. He really didn't do much, and people didn't really think highly of him at the time, even then. So, I agree. And yeah, Carter's a tough one. Amazing human being, S-tier human being, but when it comes to the presidency, there's a lot that he just bungled.
I almost want to put him at F, but when I look at who I have in F, I just can't, in good conscience, put him at F. And Jimmy Carter, when we're talking about character, he's off the charts S. Jimmy Carter is a phenomenal human being. When I said that I thought that Grant would be like in my top 2 or 3 as far as the character of people who have been president, Carter's right there too. Jimmy Carter.
Completely agree. One of the best human beings out there today.
Carter is a really, really good dude. The man's in his, mid to late 90s now. And he's still out there building homes for Habitat for Humanity. The man, he just had brain cancer. He's still out there serving people. Lousy president, phenomenal human being. I think his post-presidency has been great. So, I'm going to throw him in at D. But, all right.
Before he goes to Reagan, just quickly with Jimmy Carter, again, amazing human being. Not the greatest president. His debacle with the Iranian hostage crisis, where people died because of him. Yeah, that's big no. He did, he was responsible for SALT too. He did take part in the Camp David Accords, so like he did try to do good things internationally. It's just, it was a mixed bag there. He did establish a Department of Energy, a Department of Education, so, bonus points for that. And then, he, energy and inflation during his time was, there was an energy crisis, and then the inflation was, like, really high during his time, which kind of caused economic recession, and he just could not pull the nation out of it, which kind of killed, any popularity that he would have had. And again, with the Iran hostage crisis, just, yeah, there's not much that was working in his favor. So, yeah, I'd say D as well. I'd say D. I mean, but again, if we're talking human beings, definitely one of the best human beings ever. But just as a president, not the greatest. And now, Reagan was the other reason why I wanted to make this video, because where he ranks him and his rationale for ranking him, I'll just play the video.
Last 2 presidents that we're going to go to. And this is going to be pretty polarizing, I think, because now we're getting close enough to modern times that everybody's going to have really strong opinions on these next 2. That hostage crisis, though, yeah, and I figured somebody would talk about that. Yeah, Mr. Beat, the Ohio. I know Ohio and Michigan fought over Toledo, and the joke here in Ohio is that Ohio and Michigan fought a war over Toledo, and Ohio lost because we got Toledo. So that's the joke that we usually tell.
Living here in Ohio, I like it, but they do got a depressing history, especially when it comes to sports, man. Like I'll get into that at some point, but it's pretty depressing.
I'm gonna give Reagan an A, and I know not everybody's gonna like that. And I am conscious of the fact that there does seem to be a little bit of a political bent to who I have S and A, and I'll acknowledge that I am center-right leaning in my politics a little bit. I'm not a registered Republican, but I am center-right, and I can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4.
Nah, bro, you ain't even center-right. You right, but to each their own.
4 Republicans in the top 2. I get that. But in my lifetime, just from personal experience, I feel like Reagan's been one of the better presidents we've had. Certainly was one of the better communicators we've had. I was an 8-year-old kid that had just watched a shuttle explode with a teacher on board. And like hundreds of thousands of other kids, we were watching that live on TV, right? And that night, the speech that Reagan gave on TV, especially when he got to the part where he spoke directly to the children of America, 88, thank you, appreciate that, was just, for me, one of the most memorable presidential moments I've ever experienced. I'll never forget that. But I understand why people rank him lower, and I will not argue with that. I don't have a solid argument against that. So,
let me get this straight. When you started this video, you basically said that you weren't going to rank presidents based off of personal preference. Now, granted, I know I made an exception for Grant in terms of ranking them where I ranked them. But this is egregious, man. You're telling me you rank someone like Reagan, you put Reagan at the same level of a Theodore Roosevelt, of an FDR, of a Thomas Jefferson, of Eisenhower, well, at least in your ranking. You put him at the same level as those guys because he gave you, you felt like he talked to you personally, he gave you a nice little speech, but you're not even gonna, you basically said, you don't even have an argument as to why he shouldn't be, at least if you had, why he shouldn't be ranked lower. At least if you had said, yeah, I think he's ranked high because he did, he was the face of conservative, he was the face of conservatism. He increased military spending, which some people like, some people don't. He basically took a hardline stance on communism. You didn't say any of that. You basically said he said a speech to me when I was a little kid, and I liked it, and therefore, you made zero attempts to elaborate on why Reagan was A tier. That is the problem not because of your political leanings, man. Just the fact that you made zero attempt to even elaborate on why Reagan was, in your eyes, an amazing president. Yeah, you said he was an excellent communicator, but guess what? If I go and I kill someone and then I run to the next person and say, hey, I killed someone, guess what? I'm an excellent communicator, but what I did is inexcusable. And a lot of what Reagan did was unexcusable. Like, Reaganomics is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard. The fact that you think, not taxing the wealthy, letting them accumulate more money, and that money is going to trickle down to, middle and lower class people is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Do you want to know how wealthy people get wealthy? They hoard their money. They don't give it away. Why do you think Bezos gets rich? Why do you think Bill Gates got richer after he sold his shares in Microsoft? Why do you think all these people get richer? Because they don't pay any taxes. They don't pay anything. There's no taxes that they pay, and they just accumulate wealth. And where is that wealth going? Straight to them. It's not going down to the workers of Amazon. It's not going to the people that him and Melinda Gates were sending money to in their charitable endeavors, or even in Microsoft when Like, no, it's not going to those people. No, not at all. Like, Reaganomics is a trash idea. It's terrible. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And people, and I know a lot of conservatives to this day still, kneel at the altar of Ronald Reagan, and, he's their political daddy, basically. Basically just slob on his knob, like corn on the cob, essentially. And sorry for using a 3-6 Mafia reference here, but Reaganomics is complete garbage. It does not work. It is a terrible policy, and I don't know why people still think it does, because the wealthy have never been inclined to have their money trickle down to people of lower and middle class. It does not. That's not how it works, because when you get money, you want to get more of it. That's just, it's common sense. If I get more money, I want to get more of it. It's going to be hard for me to be like, yeah, I need to redistribute this money to, people that are below me. And there's not many people of incredible wealth that does that. I know Jeff Bezos doesn't do it, and this man's worth damn near $100 billion, or a little over that. It doesn't work. It's a terrible policy, and people still believe that it's, the policy to go with, which that alone should put them at just an F. Oh yeah, and by the way, Reagan's an F for me, period. I don't care. Like, utter trash. Just Reaganomics, you already heard my thing on that. He increased military spending. Like, he's really gotten the ball rolling on that, to where, military spending is a huge part of, the federal budget, and it continues to be a problem. And I know this is a strong opinion of mine, but I do think we need to defund the military a little bit. And Eisenhower even warned about the military-industrial complex, about like how increased military spending is going to cause issues. But we do need to defund the military a little bit. We at least like 10-15% would be more than enough, and re-establish it into domestic programs. And we wouldn't have a lot of the issues that we have today. I'm not saying it's the be-all end-all solution, but yeah, I definitely think maybe giving less money to the military would work wonders. But who am I? I mean, yeah, and because of the increased military spending, you basically ran up more of a federal deficit, which is the one thing conservatives are really against, until they're in power and they get to spend the money and they get to implement their programs. Then it's all good. Then, we don't have a problem with it. So just the hypocrisy, amazing. They're basically just doing Keynesian economics as a bunch of Republicans, which is just incredible. I mean, he bombed Libya, invaded Grenada, Iran-Contra affair, basically, selling weapons to Nicaragua, or, the money that they, lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, let me make sure I'm getting it right, because right now it's been like almost 4 hours, and I don't want to, oops. Iran-Contra affair. Yeah, so they basically sold arms to Iran, to fund their, to fund their revolution or whatever the case may be. And this is despite, Iran being in an arms embargo. And then they hope to use the funds from that particular sale to, to fund rebels in Nicaragua, the Contras. Yeah. And Reagan's like, I didn't know about it, or like, I didn't really, take part. It's like, bruh, no. You can't tell me you're the president and that you don't know about this particular. Like, no, you wanted hush, keep this hush hush, but it got out, and you got excoriated for it, and you should have, because this particular brand of foreign policy, like, we still deal with to this day, where you fund governments that are for America, even though the people leading those particular groups are terrible human beings, and like human rights violationists, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, I'll support this person because he supports America, but I'm just gonna ignore the fact that this person committed genocide and killed a whole bunch of people. And it's like, really, dude? Like, it was like the freaking communist or whatever that you're trying to get rid of, or like 10 times better, is just because they're a government that doesn't quite support you want to get rid of them. And that's basically how we do things today. That's a direct result of Reagan's policies, and we still to this day deal with that legacy. Yeah, so he also raised taxes on everyone but the wealthy. The wealthy got the tax cuts, but he raised taxes 11 times, mind you. And if the wealthy weren't getting taxed as much, who was paying the taxes? Oh, I'll tell you, the lower and middle class people. Again, just talk about the man's policies. Like, I don't have a problem with you saying, oh yeah, like ranking him at A tier. I don't have a problem with that. Everyone has their own opinion. What I do have a problem with is that you don't give a legitimate rationale, and that you don't even argue against like you basically flat out admit that yeah, his policies suck so much that like I really have no argument against his policies. I can see why. So you yourself even know that his policies were complete trash, but because he made you feel good as a young child, he gave you a little bedtime story, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, he made you feel good, and he was an excellent communicator, therefore he's top of the line. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of people that are excellent communicators, but they just suck as presidents. Oh yeah, Star Wars, dumb as hell. I was like, oh yeah, let's build a nuclear, or let's build a shield over America so we don't get like, yeah, no. Even people were laughing at him about like, the concept of it. So yeah, he ignored the AIDS epidemic until it became he ignored the problem of AIDS 6 years into, until it was like 6 years into his administration. Then he acted like, oh yeah, this is a big deal and we're gonna be on the ball about this. Like, bro, it took you 6 years to realize that this is a real thing. Like, dang, even Trump realized that COVID was a problem like 2 years into, a couple years, or not a couple years, sorry, like a year into the pandemic. Like, it took you 6 years to figure out that AIDS was an issue. Like, trash, man. Just trash. Oh yeah, and he cut the budgets of Medicaid, food stamps, federal education, and the Environmental Protection Agency. So, Reagan, me personally, I'd rank him at an F. I'm not even, like he gets no love from me. But at the very least, I would have. Oh, my bad. Oh yeah, is it incomplete? All right, come on. Yeah, he gets enough. I'm sorry. With all the negative aspects of his policy that we've had to deal with to this day, he deserves nothing less. And yeah, and I'll reiterate his point. I can see why conservatives would probably view him as an A, because he set the policy that they've been following for 20, 30, 40 years. To this day, people still kneel at the altar of Reagan. Fox News believes that Reagan is, essentially Jesus Christ all over again. But his policies are terrible. He does not care about people. He did not care about people that weren't rich. Period. He did not care about nations that were going through war, as long as it benefited America. Just a terrible president. But again, my problem with him is that he didn't even talk about the policies. He knew that if he talked about the policies, that people would excoriate him. So he tried to just be like, yeah, let me give you a nice, easy story that, will not offend anyone. And no, you can't do that. If you're going to rank people, if you're going to rank these presidents, you have to give them their day. I would have been fine if you did this in 3 parts, because for me, I've been talking for almost like 4 hours straight. Like, yeah, I'm looking at my YouTube thing. It's 3 hours, 38 minutes. But at the very least, I'm giving each president their time of day. Yeah, it's long, but I feel like it's necessary, and I feel like people need to be educated properly on, what each president has done. And maybe, and again, I don't expect everyone to agree with me. Absolutely not. However, I do expect, a more detailed, more, what's the word I'm looking for? I expected more information. I expected more from you, sir. And again, I know some of the more unpopular, or some of the more polarizing ones, like Jackson, Reagan. Like, yeah, like you probably don't want to talk because you don't want to start that debate. But at the same time, if you're gonna rank, then rank them properly. Give each of them their time of day. Don't just brush it aside. Don't be like, oh, that Trail of Tears thing, or oh, he told me a speech that I like very much. Therefore he's A tier. And I know that's not the actual reason, but if that's the reason that you give on your particular stream, then you can't do that, man. You got to give each president their time of day. Period. I would love to stop talking now, but I knew that I had to give each president, their time of day, their true legacy, what they truly were responsible for, or what happened during their administrations, because I feel like each of them deserved that, even the ones that were complete trash. Like, even Reagan, like, I have to go through his legacy. As much as I hate talking about him, I have to do it. So
that's just really kind of a personal feeling on that one. But all right, George H.W. Bush. I think I'm going to go C with him. One-term president, did some pretty decent things. Again, I
don't really know what decent things he did. I'm just he gets a D for me. I'm sorry. Because you raised taxes, despite that being one of your campaign pledges that you wouldn't raise taxes, and you raised it multiple times, no less. Which, just
I think he's a pretty good guy. I think the good and the bad kind of outweigh each other. Sandre, when it comes to AIDS with Reagan, I'm not sure that any other president would have done any better with that. When it comes to the AIDS crisis, I think that probably most presidents would have dealt poorly.
Well, no, what he could have done is acknowledge that it even existed in the first place. You can't just be like, oh, yeah, this isn't even a thing. Like, yeah, I understand AIDS is, because of STD and because of, injecting yourself with dirty needles and whatnot. I understand that. But at the same time, you can be on the ball. You can get ahead of the ball. You could provide information that doesn't confuse people. You can be like, look, AIDS is not... And this is information that was readily available even during like 1981, 82, 83, while they were still researching HIV. You could have been on the ball. You just like, I don't think any president, maybe not, but you could have at least attempted. You could have at least been like, hey, we need to get ahead of this before this becomes a bigger problem. Maybe we can educate our populace before this becomes a bigger thing. You could have done that as president, but you chose to bury your head in the sand for 6 years before you even try to do anything. So don't give me that BS that I don't think there was any other president that could have done any better. No, he didn't try. That is the issue. That is the problem. He didn't try until he was on his way out. And then he's like, okay, yeah, fine. I'll acknowledge that this is a problem. No, you should have acknowledged that this was a problem 6 years ago when you first became president, or even 5 years ago. Like I said, even Trump acknowledged that COVID was a problem, a year into the pandemic. Now, if someone like him could do that, I'm pretty sure someone like yourself, Reagan, who was infinitely more popular, could acknowledge that HIV/AIDS was a problem instead of burying your head in the sand for 6 years and not acknowledging that it was an issue at all. So I don't want to hear that crap about, oh yeah, Reagan wasn't, No, he knew. He didn't care for it.
Poorly with that, but I do think Reagan, that was kind of poorly dealt with during his administration. Iran-Contra, not great. But so I'll put George H.W. Bush C. I think that's a decent place to put him. And again, I think people could make an argument to put him lower, but I'll go ahead and put him right there. I appreciate all of you and your thought.
So that's pretty much all I have to say. I was going to follow his thing where I'm not going to rank, Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump. Obviously with Biden, it's still too early to tell, how his presidency is going to turn out. But yes, this is my ranking. As you can see, it's a little bit more even, less like a bell curve. But I do think that I did a decent enough job to give each president their time of day, and I didn't shortchange any of them. And again, I feel like if he had actually gone the route that I did, he probably would have talked the same amount of time that I did, which is probably something that he didn't want to do. But for me, I'm like, no, in order to, like, you can't call yourself a historian and not try to educate. The part of the job of a historian is to educate the populace on why, these presidents, why you ranked them the way that you ranked them and what their legacies were. And again, not everyone's going to agree with my ranking. Not everyone's going to agree with his ranking. But it is important to give each president their due. Explain why they were good, why they were bad, and explain your rationale. And if people agree, great. If people don't, it's fine too. But I don't want situations where it's like Reagan, like, oh yeah, he talked to me, he gave no, don't give me that crap. And don't be like, oh yeah, the Trail of Tears, that thing, just like it was some policy that just was unpopular. Like, no, it was a terrible policy that killed a lot of people, and he should be excoriated for that. And Reagan, of course, go over his policies, what were good about them, what were bad about them. So you have to do that. And mind you, like I said, you could have had like two, like, and I like this guy, and don't get me wrong, just because I'm excoriating him about Reagan doesn't mean I don't like this guy. Like, I do like his content. Like, he is knowledgeable about things, like especially when it comes to the English monarchs. Like, I do think he's very knowledgeable about that. But I don't think he did this particular topic justice. And yes, it is controversial. It is, polarizing. But I mean, that's the field that you step in when you do stuff like this. Like, when you're automatically, when you start ranking things, like, there's going to be disagreement. There's going to be contention. That is always a thing. But, the best you can do is explain each and give them their due. And again, you can do like 1 or 2 points, like, yeah, I like this president because boom, boom, these policies, and I don't like him because these policies, and then, grade him accordingly. But, like, he even knew some of the more polarizing ones, like Jackson and Reagan, like, he just wanted to just skate across and not even try to, rationalize. But I have all day. I wasn't gonna do that. I wasn't gonna just let that skate by. So those two presidents were really the main reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. But yeah, that's all I have. Thank you for everyone who was watching this, and for those who do want to watch this. I'll have my well, obviously you can click on my channel and see my content. I do have some stuff from World of Warcraft and from Valheim from way before, if you guys want to check that out. And if anyone wants to subscribe and watch more of my content, I'll try to make this more of like a weekly thing. And whatever the topic is, I'll definitely let people know on Twitter, maybe on Facebook. I probably should put my Facebook information, maybe on Instagram, I don't know, but I'll try to make this more of like a weekly thing, not necessarily a reaction video like this, but my own personal, like, from the jump. Like, maybe I'll rank like with sports, maybe I'll rank the top 10 quarterbacks or something, or ever, or I'll rank the top 10 running backs, whatever the case may be. I'll probably try to do more stuff like that. And again, with history, I'll also try to do historical stuff as well. And then I'll also probably be streaming some gaming stuff as well, especially with Warcraft, since 9.1 is coming out. So I'll probably be playing more Warcraft as well, and I'll try to stream a lot of what I'm doing in the game. So if people want to watch that, that's great as well. But please subscribe if you do visit my channel. I'd appreciate it a lot. And if I can get more subscribers, hopefully it'll give me more incentive to release more content and be like, yeah, people are actually watching and hearing what I have to say, and it's great. But if you don't want to subscribe, that's fine too. I'm not like, oh my god, why aren't you subscribing? Please, I need it. Like, nah, none of that. If you enjoy watching my content, that's great. That's all I care about. But yeah, this particular topic, I was like, I have to respond. I have to say something, because it did not do justice. And with his stuff, like, I feel like that's not it's not good quality. Like his stuff is good quality usually, but this wasn't it. So I had to say something. But thank you everyone, and I will see you next time, maybe next week or the week after. But I'll try to be more consistent about stuff like this. This is my first time doing something like this, so I'll definitely try to be more consistent. But thank you everyone, and I hope to see you